This is the first book in the Wizards of Once series. The series will be released half a book at a time. Look out every Saturday 6 p.m. in the time zone GMT+2. Side note. I do not claim by any right to say that I published them. But give full credit to Cressida, Cowell and David Tennant. Subscribe and turn on notifications to find out what happens next. I hope these books give you the joy and magic they give me when I listen to them. Enjoy and listen intently.
14. Queen Sycorax is disappointed by her daughter again. Queen Sycorax watched Tsar being dragged away, bundled down into the darkness of her dungeons. "What a rude boy," she sniffed disapprovingly. "Is it too much to expect in Kanzo the great enchanter to bring up his son with slightly better manners?" She turned to her daughter. "I do hope that if you are ever captured by an enemy, Wish," said Queen Sycorax, "you will maintain your dignity and be civilly polite, particularly if they are threatening to kill you. It is hardly going to put them off." Wish was so confused she didn't know what to think or feel. On the one hand, she was dreadfully frightened for Squeeze Juice. On the other, of course, her brilliant, splendid, intelligent mother wouldn't ever do anything that was wrong. Would she? Surely her mother wasn't going to allow Squeeze Juice to die. "You're not going to let any harm come to Tsar Sprite, are you, Mother?" said Wish. "You're going to take them to the stone in time so he can be cured, aren't you?" "That is none of your business," snapped Queen Sycorax. "But it's not the Sprite's fault that he got witch blood on him. You saw how frightened he was, poor little thing," protested Wish. "Sprites and wizards are magic, and magic is bad, so it does not matter if the sprite was frightened, and you should not be concerned about their fate anyway," said Queen Sycorax waspishly. "Why are you sympathizing with the enemy, and how dare you question my decisions? I will do exactly what I think is right." Wish hopped guiltily and anxiously from one leg to another. Queen Sycorax's eyes had narrowed with suspicion. Why was that stupid little Wish looking so conscience-stricken and so upset? Could she be hiding something? Was there more to her hopeless daughter than it seemed at first sight? "The guards were saying that you captured this rude little wizard, Wish," said Queen Sycorax. "You?" Queen Sycorax always made an effort to speak reasonably kindly to her irritatingly useless daughter, but something about the way she said the word wish always suggested dissatisfaction, as if the word reminded the Queen that she wished Wish were a completely different person than she was, which indeed she did. For Wish was a great disappointment to Queen Sycorax. The Queen had hoped to have a daughter who was tall and golden like herself, not someone small and scruffy and weird, with hair that wouldn't lie flat, and an eye patch, and a limp. "So, Wish, did you fight this young wizard and his animal and sprite retinue, and overcome him with your superior warrior skills?" asked Queen Sycorax, sceptically. Wish, looking up adoringly into her mother's golden face, longed to be able to say that this is what had happened. How wonderful would it be to see Sycorax's expression change, so that she looked back at Wish with admiration, with respect, with love. But her clever mother would never believe her, and it might make her so suspicious that she would investigate further, and then she might find the sword, and then all would be up for Tsar. "Well, no, Mother," admitted Wish. "I heard a noise, and I saw it was a wizard, and I was going to try and fight him, but then I fell over and shouted for help." The suspicion faded from Queen Sycorax's eyes, and she now looked merely displeased. That was entirely believable. "I wouldn't call that capturing the wizard, would you?" snapped Queen Sycorax. "You fell over and you shouted for help. Falling over is not considered to be one of the traditional warrior skills, Wish." Queen Sycorax looked at Wish's eye patch and her limpy leg as if she had lost the use of both of these body parts out of an act of wilful disorganization. "Why can't you be more like your sisters?" Wish bit her lip to stop herself from crying. Crying was another of those things that Queen Sycorax considered to be a weakness that warriors should not indulge in. "You could choose to follow the example of your sister Drama, for instance," Sycorax continued. She has made a quilt out of the beards of dwarves she shot down from a remarkably long distance. I deplore the violence, of course, but those sort of teenage high spirits are, after all, the warrior way. When I was your age, I had already hunted down and killed my first giant, all on my own. But you have wilfully and inexplicably decided to go in an entirely different direction. I'm not sure why you think it's a good idea to look so odd, so lopsided, so... The weight of Sycorax's disappointment was so depressing that Wish could feel herself drooping like her fingers were made of lead. Be merciful, thought Sycorax to herself, as Wish wilted miserably in front of her. I suppose the child can't help looking like a weird little twig that somebody accidentally trod on. I suppose she can't help lolloping about the place like an unbalanced bunny rabbit. A queen should be gracious as well as severely and incorruptibly just. A queen must be forgiving as well as unbendingly and unswervingly firm. Sycorax controlled herself with a strong effort. I suppose, said Queen Sycorax, gritting her teeth, you did your best, however inferior that best might be. How is your headache, thinking of physical and mental weakness? My headache, said Wish blankly, before remembering hurriedly that she had told her mother she was going to bed early with a headache so she could sneak out after the spoon. Oh, the headache's much better, Mother, thank you, said Wish. And how are you finding learning how to be a warrior? Asked her mother. It's quite difficult, Mother. Queen Sycorax sighed with exasperation. Madame Dreadlock says that your spelling is going particularly badly. Reading and writing is a sign of how superior and civilised us warriors are, you know, Wish. Yes, but the thing with the spelling is the letters won't stay still, explained Wish. They keep wandering about in my head, and I forget what order they were in the first place. There are some people, Wish suggested bravely, who think that spelling might not be as important as the things you are trying to spell. Well, those people are mad, said Queen Sycorax. You'll just have to try a bit harder, won't you? Starting with your appearance. Wish was looking even more than usually bedraggled. Cloak on inside out and back to front. Ripped clothes, twigs all over the place, hair whipped up into frenzied knots from when Squeeze Juice had made a nest out of it earlier. Even a substandard warrior like you should always be well turned out, Wish, said Queen Sycorax, sweeping away. Every hair in place, every weapon sharpened, every fingernail shining, remember that. And just as Queen Sycorax was sailing off in a rustle of long, gracious white skirts, a certain knot that attached a little iron key to the belt she wore around her waist undid itself, like a small snake uncoiling, and the key dropped to the floor. It was a very tiny key, so as it dropped onto the stone flagstones it made a very tiny noise that the Queen did not hear. She disappeared around the corner, not knowing she had lost it. Ting! Wish, looking after her mother dejectedly, heard the noise. She picked up the key. She opened her mouth to say, Mother, you've dropped your key, and then she shut it again. The key was small and black and cold. The hair stood up on the back of Wish's neck as she realised it was the key not only to every room in the warrior fort, but to her mother's dungeons. How strange that Queen Sycorax should lose it at that precise particular moment. Did it drop, or did it jump? If you were a fanciful person, you might have said that it was almost as if the key were looking for Wish and wanted her to use it. But we are not fanciful people, and that would be ridiculous. 15. Breaking into Queen Sycorax's dungeon. Wish and Bodkin and Bumbleboozle tried to sneak down into Sycorax's dungeons in the daytime, but it was impossible. There were too many people around. We'll have to wait until everyone goes to bed, said Wish. But how are we going to get past the sentry guarding the entrance to my mother's dungeons? I has a great sleeping spell. Let me put him to sleep, squeaked Bumbleboozle. Your spells won't work here, I'm afraid, Bumbleboozle, said Wish. Bodkin looked guilty. I still think this is a terrible idea, he said. But just in case you wanted to go through with it, I put a small sleeping draught in the sentry's serving of wild boar stew when I was serving him dinner. Once magic people aren't the only ones who know something about herb work." "Oh, Bodkin, thank you," said Wish in delight. "Don't thank me," said Bodkin gloomily. "My father would be very disappointed in me. I just felt sorry for that poor little squeeze juice, but I should be able to overcome mere personal weakness and do the right thing. I don't know what's come over me." So late that night, Wish and Bodkin crept down to the great door which was the entrance to Queen Sycorax's dungeons. The sentry who was supposed to be guarding it had indeed fallen fast asleep, so they tiptoed past him, unlocked the door with Sycorax's key, and slipped in, soft as shadows, closing the door behind them. As the door shut, Bodkin had a suffocating feeling of panic. Sycorax's dungeons tended to have that effect on people. "You stay here, Bumbleboozle," said Wish, "so you can come and warn us if my mother or anyone else comes down after us." "Okay," squeaked Bumbleboozle. The smaller hairy fairies were always extremely pleased to be given a role, and she was delighted not to have to go any further. For in the centre of the room they were standing in was the true entrance to the dungeons, a great pit with a movable platform hanging above it. Bodkin stared into the pit. "We're going to have to go down there, aren't we?" he said, pathetically hoping somehow Wish might say no. "Yup," said Wish, climbing onto the platform.
"Goodbye,"
whispered Bumbleboozle.
"Good luck. It was nice knowing you. For big people, you were kind of less smelly than most."
"Thank you," said Bodkin. Shakily he climbed on the platform, and Wish untied the rope and gradually let it out, and down, down, down they went, the temperature dropping like a stone, as did Bodkin's heart as the platform lowered deeper, ever deeper into the underground prison. Wish's heart was sinking too, for coming down here felt like not only a betrayal, but also a trespass. Sycorax would have secrets here, because a queen must have her secrets. And Sycorax did have secrets. All of Sycorax's secrets were hidden underground. Wish knew that, and she also knew that she really, really did not want to find out what those secrets were. But she had no choice. Down, down, down they went, deeper, ever deeper. When the platform finally came to a soft landing, what seemed like a horribly long time later, they landed in the secret midnight world of the prisons of Queen Sycorax, buried in 100 yards of stone and earth, deep below the Warrior Hill Fort. Wish and Bodkin stepped off the platform into a grim little chamber, with a steady drip, drip of water coming from the ceiling, and lit by dim and guttering torchlight. There were no fewer than 7 corridors leading off the chamber. Sycorax's dungeons were on the site of what in ancient times had been a mine, so they were haunted not only by the prisoners of the present, but the giant and dwarf and human miners of the past. Mine had turned to prison, and the dungeons were now a great spreading maze, like a gigantic long-legged spider's web, with corridors meandering and crossing over each other in trickily confusing fashion, just like the tortuous maze of tricky Queen Sycorax's mind. Off these corridors were endless little chambers, some with prisoners in them, some with other things. But how were Bodkin and Wish to know which way to go?
"And what's that noise?"
whispered Bodkin. Sycorax's dungeons, as I mentioned earlier, were always filled with noise. An iron music of despair and sweetness all mixed together, for longing does have its own sweetness, and beautiful things can come out of pain. The once magic people imprisoned in those underground regions could no longer perform magic. They could not work their spells, the sprites could not fly, the giants were very slowly shrinking. For in one of the secret cells in the lowest, deepest chamber of all was Sycorax's stone that takes away magic, and they had all been taken there, and they had touched the stone and lost the magic that made them what they were. They were then led back to their cells and kept there until they readjusted and got used to life without their magic. No one had quite got used to it yet, And so the once magic people who were living there filled the dungeons with noise. Melancholy noise, angry noise, regretful noise. The sound of the stamping feet of ogres treading in sad, slow circles, the howling of werewolves, the song of sprites singing in high, eerie voices about the bright old days. It was the one thing they could do now. They had lost their wings, their spells, their hope. They had lost their sight, their light for when the magic went from sprites. Their colours faded. The inner light that burned so bright flickered and died. But they still made noise. They were brought iron spoons and iron dinner plates to eat from, and they clasped the iron in their no longer magic fists or paws, and they tapped out a melancholy beat that drummed through the prison like the ache of a long-lost love. When Wish and Bodkin entered the dungeons, they could hear the song of a sprite called the Once Sprite, who was standing on the shoulder of Crusher the Giant, locked in one of Sycorax's cells. For Wish had been right. Crusher had indeed been captured by Queen Sycorax's warriors when Tsar had left him behind in the clearing of the forest. And here Crusher the Giant was now, hidden somewhere in Queen Sycorax's dungeons, his eyes closed, thinking great thoughts and hoping against hope that Tsar would come and save him. Meanwhile, on his shoulder, the one sprite was singing of one particular bright blue of a summer's day, when he flew up, and slept on the wing like a swift, allowing the air currents of the atmosphere to be his bed, so high that the last thing he saw as he fell asleep was the many islands of Albion spread out below him, the forests reaching from sea to sea. And he sang it so beautifully that all the inhabitants of that underground chamber thought that they could see it too, and joined in the song of lost magic, stamping, beating an iron beat in time with the giant's great beating heart, as if they were up there in the skies, not down buried deep, lost and forgotten, landlocked forever. Poor Squeeze-Juice. Was this to be his fate too? Once you have heard the song of lost magic, you never forget it. The confusion of emotions in that song, the despair, the hope, the regret, coupled with the exquisite recreation of the magic world and the powers that the once magic people realized in the moment of losing they had lost, and the way they echoed down the corridors, repeating and mirroring and bouncing off the warren of walls, created a maze of noise and emotions and moral choices at least as disorientating and overwhelming as the physical maze itself. "Have we done right? Have we done wrong?" sang the songs. "What have we lost? But had we no choice?" And these songs ran into other songs about the beauty of the wildwoods at midnight, where only the eyes of magic could see in the dark. The formation of hair ice on the elder tree twigs as the first deep frost of winter came to the forest, and cyclamen buds, deep violet and leafless, pushing their way through the earth and the discarded autumn leaf clutter from the trees above, too quiet for dull human eyes to see their slow growing, but clear as daylight for the eyes of magic. And it wasn't even certain which were the songs of living people and what were the songs of long-dead ghosts of the magic people imprisoned in these warrens long ago, whose voices had sunk and frozen into the walls, only to be ricocheted back into life again by the slicing blow of a present sound wave, as if the spirits of the long-dead goblin and hob-elf and she-dwarf miners were still there, picking the sounds out of the walls with their enchanted axes and sending the songs off on their way again, so that they were alive once more in the ears of Bodkin and Wish. Ah, yes, it was a strange, haunted place, that underground prison, where magic and iron and past and present and good and evil were being held together in a much more complicated and contradictory manner than you might expect from Sycorax's confident iron hill fort standing so proudly above them. "We have no map," said Bodkin, covering his ears, for the noise was so muddling it made it difficult to think, let alone make any clear choices. He had already explored down one of the corridors and found it split in another 2 directions at the end of it. "How are we going to find where she's imprisoned Tsar? We're never going to locate him in a maze as big as this one." "A maze can be as effective as locks and keys if you're trying to hide something." Wish and Bodkin walked round the chamber in despair for a while, before the enchanted spoon noticed something down at the bottom of one of the unlit deep black corridors. A tiny sprinkle of light, blinking on and off like a remote star. The spoon rapped Wish gently on the head to get her attention, and then tip-tapped his way along the corridor to draw her attention to the little pool of light. Wish felt her way after the spoon, with Bodkin saying, "Where are you going?" and following her reluctantly. And when she had reached the bright little particles, she could see another patch way in the distance, beckoning her like weirlight. Sprite dust. Tsar must have sprinkled sprite dust along the way so we could follow him. That's clever, said Wish admiringly. So on they went, feeling their way towards the distant sprinkles of light, deeper and deeper, losing themselves in the twisting corridors of Sycorax's dungeons. "It must be somewhere round here," said Bodkin, as they came to a long corridor with at least 25 rooms coming off it. "We'll just have to check every room." "Do we have to?" said Wish. "It's all very well for you. It's not your mother. But I feel really weird finding things out about my mother that I really do not want to know." Reluctantly, Wish took out the key and unlocked the nearest door, which swung open with an ominous creak. "You look, Bodkin," said Wish, putting her hand over her eye. Bodkin peered round the edge of the door and fainted. Wish very hurriedly shut the door. "What was in there?" said Wish, when Bodkin came round again. "You really, really don't want to know," said Bodkin. After that, Wish decided that it was kind of worse than not knowing, because then it left it up to her imagination as to what it might be in there, so she made up her mind she was going to look this time. Bodkin opened up the next door and immediately shut it again with an "Ugh" of disgust. "What was in there?" cried Wish. "Heads," said Bodkin. "Oh, come on, I've had enough of this," said Wish, pushing him out of the way. "It can't possibly be heads. You're just completely determined that my mother should be this bad person." And she shoved Bodkin out of the way and went into the room. It was heads. "Oh," said Wish. Wish shut the door again very, very quickly. "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for that," she said. "My mother is very interested in anatomy." "Really?" said Bodkin sceptically. Other rooms contained less gruesome things. A whole collection of spelling books, for example. A library with everything carefully lined up in rows and labelled, for Sycorax was a very neat person. A potion room. Many, many collections of banned magic objects. But even after a long time searching, they still hadn't found Tsar. Meanwhile, down in cell number 445, as hour after hour passed, with no sign of Wish and Bodkin and the sword coming to rescue him, Tsar's spirits were sinking, and he was very close to despair. Of course, Sycorax's dungeons were designed with spirit sinking in mind. That's part of the point of a dungeon, after all. You don't design them to be cheerful, airy spaces with a nice view and comfy seating. Every now and then during the day, Sycorax would visit and ask whether he had changed his mind about telling her where the sword was, and the sprites and Tsar got the opportunity to shout and hiss rude remarks about her nose, and that cheered them up a little. But then she went away again, and the dank and miserable dark prison air would sink into their bones, and the song of lost magic would depress them even further.
"She's not coming, that Wish,"
hissed Tiffenstorm, whose light was fading fast.
"Stupid warrior of a girl. Why would you trust her?"
"She took the sword. She warned me about the Love Never Lies potion," said Tsar moodily, for he was worrying about the same thing himself.
"They're too stupid to follow the sprite dust. They're too cowardly to come here anyway. They hate you. They won't be able to unlock the doors."
The miserable sprites kept up a steady flow of discouraging comments, for they were desperately unhappy.
"You kidnapped them. You stole their sword. You tricked them," said Ariel. "Why would they risk their lives for you, the enemy, the turnips in tin cans?"
"Ariel has got a point," said Caliburn gloomily. Had Tsar been stupid to put his life in the hands of two enemy warriors? "They liked squeeze juice," said Tsar. "I know they did." He looked down at Squeeze Juice. Squeeze-Juice was so dark now he was nearly black, and his little heart was barely beating. He was racked with seizure after seizure, where he was so overcome with such shaking and delirium that he was not himself. But now he came to his senses for a second.
"What's happening to me?"
whispered Squeeze-Juice, and you could see the fear in his eyes.
"Am I going to the dark side?"
"Of course not," said Tsar. And just as Squeeze-Juice fell back into a coma again, he whispered so faintly Tsar could barely hear it,
"Tsar will save me,"
and put one tiny claw-like hand trustingly against Tsar's chest. Tsar would have to give Sycorax what she wanted. At least Squeeze-Juice would live. But then his father's magic would be in danger. Tsar was not a despairing person, but even he was beginning to run out of hope when he heard footsteps and whispering in the corridor.
"You look in this one, Bodkin. I just can't bear to," said the voice of Wish.
"They're here!" cried Bodkin's voice as Bodkin's face appeared in the grill. There was a click, click, clicking noise, and creak. The heavy door of cell number 445 swung open. Tsar could never have imagined that he would be so astonishingly grateful and thankful to see two warriors, one tall skinny one and one little limpy one. Even the sprites were delighted, somehow finding the energy to buzz excitedly, although they barely had the strength to fly now, and were lower and lower in the air, as if they had lead in their shoes. "You came," said Tsar to Bodkin and Wish, so excited he even hugged them. Who would ever have thought that Tsar would hug a warrior?
"Of course we came," said Wish stoutly. "I said I would, didn't I? I wouldn't leave a friend in trouble like that."
Tsar agreed that she was an excellent friend who had shown unexpected initiative for a warrior.
"How did you get in, and how are you opening the doors?" asked Tsar. "Bodkin gave the sentry a sleeping draught," said Wish, "and my mother dropped her key to the dungeons. How is Squeeze-Juice?"
She could see the little sprite shaking inside Tsar's waistcoat. "He's not doing well, I'm afraid," said Tsar, as Wish unchained the snowcats with Queen Sycorax's key, and the snowcats burst out excitedly. "We need to get him to the stone as fast as we can." But just as they were preparing to leave, Bumbleboozle zoomed like a little speedy midge streak of lightning in through the grill of the door in a state of the greatest alarm. She was thoroughly out of breath, for she had flown all the way from where she'd been on lookout up at the entrance to the dungeons.
"Queen Sycorax!" she shrieked. "She's coming!"
16. A really bad moment for Queen Sycorax to turn up.
"Queen Sycorax is coming," said Bodkin, just about managing not to faint again. "She mustn't find me here," squealed Wish, absolutely petrified. It was one thing to secretly decide that she wanted to be friends with a wizard. It was quite another to be found by her mother in the act of not just sympathising with the enemy, but actively unlocking their cell and helping them escape.
"Don't worry," said Tsar. "Hide and I'll deal with her. I'll be polite this time, I promise. Give me the sword and lock the door behind you."
"Be nice to her, Tsar,"
warned Wish, throwing Tsar the enchanted sword. "Trust me," grinned Tsar. Bodkin and Wish ran out of the room and hid round the corner in desperate haste, for from the sound of her footsteps, Queen Sycorax was approaching at quite a speed. She was coming to offer Tsar one last chance to see sense and get his sprite to the stone that takes away magic in time to save its life. Surely even a wizard boy with no conscience at all would not want his sprite to die. But Tsar was proving to be unexpectedly obstinate. She was alarmed to find that she had lost her key. Luckily she had a spare, furious to see her sentry fast asleep, and as soon as she set foot in the dungeon, she sensed something had gone wrong. Queen Sycorax knew every noise that went on in her underground home, every drip of water, every muffled moan from her prisoners, every tap of the guard, every flicker of candle, every line of song, ghost or sprite, was familiar to Queen Sycorax. There was something awry. She knew it. She moved up from her normal glide to a most unaccustomed actual run, so that her footsteps made quite a racket in those echoing chambers. If Bumbleboozle had not warned them, Sycorax would have caught her daughter in the act of aiding and abetting the enemy. But Bodkin and Wish had whisked round the corner in the nick of time, locking the door again behind them. So when Queen Sycorax unlocked the door of cell number 445 and swept in with a regal swish of her rich red cloak, Tsar was standing in the middle of the room as if nothing had happened, the enchanted sword behind his back. "What is going on?" panted Queen Sycorax. "Nothing," said Tsar innocently. Snapped Queen Sycorax disbelievingly, her eyes ranging suspiciously all over Tsar, for she did not trust him for 1 second. "This is your last chance, Tsar, son of Encanzo," snapped Queen Sycorax. "I will not come back again tonight, and your sprite will be dead by morning. Where is my sword?" "Would this be the sword that you were talking about?" said Tsar thoughtfully, taking the sword out from behind his back. Queen Sycorax went absolutely rigid with shock. A low growling behind her, and 3 enormous snowcats with teeth like kitchen knives were slowly, menacingly creeping out of the shadows. "How were they unchained from the wall?" breathed Sycorax, as white as her dress. "Who brought you my key? And where did you get my sword?" "Never you mind, but don't move, Queen Sycorax," said Tsar, "or I will kill you with this sword." That beastly boy. She should have brought guards with her. But the guards had thoroughly searched him, so she thought she was perfectly safe visiting an unarmed little boy and a few sprites, all safely locked up in her most secure cell. Sycorax's hand crept towards her waistband, where her own sword was hanging. "I said don't move," said Tsar, and there was a gleam in his eye that made Queen Sycorax halt. Wizards were generally a peaceable people, but Tsar was not like most wizards the Queen had ever met. "So, Tsar, son of Encanzo," spat Queen Sycorax, infuriated to find the tables had been turned on her. "What are you going to do now that you've burgled my sword?" "I'm going to take my sprite to the stone that takes away magic," said Tsar, "and then I'm going to release the giants and other magic prisoners that you have wickedly locked up here, and we can all escape from this fort of dullness and iron turnip heads and go back to Wizard Camp where we belong." "You will be arrested as soon as you leave these dungeons," said Queen Sycorax. "Giants are rather visible, and this fort is swarming with guards." "But you're a tricky, wicked queen with a lot of secrets," said Tsar, "so I bet you have a secret exit to these dungeons and a secret password too." "Perhaps I do," said Queen Sycorax dryly, "but it is highly unlikely I would tell you about either in the circumstances." "How about if I strike you a bargain, just like you offered me one?" said Tsar craftily. "If you tell me the way to the Chamber of Magic Removal and the way to the secret exit, and also the secret password, I will leave you this sword." Queen Sycorax was delighted, although she didn't show it. She really, really wanted that sword, especially now that witches had returned to the forest. The boy thought he was so clever, but he obviously didn't realise the importance of that particular enchanted sword to offer it up so easily. "I accept your bargain," said Queen Sycorax smoothly. "The way to the Chamber of Magic Removal is—" "Oh, no," interrupted Tsar. "No, no, no! Please stop right there, Queen Sycorax." He reached into his waistcoat and withdrew a small bottle. "Apparently, queens can tell lies, in pursuit of a higher good, of course. So I'm afraid you're going to have to tell me the answer while holding the Love Never Lies potion, so I know you're telling me the truth." Queen Sycorax gave him a look of the purest dislike. Tsar handed her the Love Never Lies potion. "The way to the Chamber of Magic Removal is to turn right and go down the corridor, and it's the 7th door in the Great Cavern. And from there you can reach the secret exit by turning left at every second turning, and the secret password is Control," said Queen Sycorax. Tsar made her say it twice to check the love potion wasn't changing colour, but it remained red, so she must be telling him the truth. He took the Love Never Lies potion from her. "And now I'll leave you the sword," said Tsar, holding up the Love Never Lies potion so that Queen Sycorax could see it clearly. And as soon as he said those words, the liquid inside turned blacker than soot. "Whoops," said Tsar happily. "Dear, oh dear, how confusing. It appears that I was lying," grinned Tsar. "It's so difficult to keep up, isn't it?" "Tricked." The horrible little wizard boy had tricked Sycorax into giving him the secret password, and he was going to take the sword anyway. It is always annoying for a very tricky person like Queen Sycorax to finally meet someone even trickier than herself. So Queen Sycorax lost her temper. It was most unlike her, but it had been a trying day. "You rude, lying, disobedient trickster of a boy!" shouted Queen Sycorax. Now, tutted Tsar. "Be polite, Queen Sycorax. Insults will get you nowhere. Please, could you very kindly lend me your keys and your cloak as well? I think it will be helpful for me to disguise myself as you so that your guards let us leave without a fuss. Thank you so much." With gritted teeth, Queen Sycorax handed him her keys to all the cells, and her very distinctive bright red cloak, lined snugly with royal black and white fur. "You have to admit," continued Tsar, putting Queen Sycorax's magnificent cloak round his shoulders, "a boy of destiny like me does need a really cool weapon that is magic mixed with iron. I'm not surprised you're so keen on this sword. It's something quite out of the ordinary." Sycorax gave a smile made out of icicles. "I'm afraid I'm going to have to lock you in your own cell," said Tsar apologetically. "It's not exactly suitable for royalty, but you are a very wicked queen to have taken away the magic of my people and kept us prisoners and threatened to kill my sprite. You need to be taught a lesson, and that is what prison is for."
"Can I do her hair, Tsar?" begged Bumbleboozle. "Please, can I do her hair? She's been so mean to poor Squeeze Juice."
"Oh, all right," said Tsar, "but do it gently." Bumbleboozle flew into the Queen's hair, and in 2 snaps of a ladybird's wing she had whipped it up into a creatively complicated rat's nest of tangles. Sycorax was standing absolutely still and white and bone-deadly with anger. Bumbleboozle buzzed backwards to survey her handiwork with satisfaction. Above Sycorax's pointed with freezing rage face, so dignified, so regal, so tidy, so furious, her beautiful pure waterfall of controlled golden tresses was now shooting upward in a vertical mess of scrambled electricity, like a furball having a fit. "Oh, that's good, very good," hissed Tiffenstorm in malicious delight, and the sprites nearly fell out of the air, they were laughing so hard. "Those elf locks will take weeks to brush out." "And while you are brushing them, it will help you remember," cautioned Tsar, "to leave us once magic people alone in the future." "And I warn you," spat Queen Sycorax, every word a cold white arrow, "never to set foot in my territory ever again. Or by the gods of the trees and water, I swear I shall make you regret it." "You'll have to catch me first," grinned Tsar. Then he said, "Goodbye, Queen Sycorax," giving her a very low bow, and he and the snowcats and the sprites swept towards the door, Tsar with a very satisfactory royal swish of Sycorax's own cloak. Just as Tsar was about to leave the chamber, he had a thought, and he turned. By the way, I didn't really mean it about being soft," said Tsar. "You are just as tough as a warrior queen ought to be." He ran out the door, and Bodkin, waiting hidden by the doorway, locked the door of the chamber behind him, leaving Sycorax all alone in cell number 445, thoughtfully adjusting her armour. She had a lot to think about. "You were very mean to my mother," scolded Wish, once they were out of earshot. "I was very polite," protested Tsar. "I said nice things about how tough she was." "You said she was a very wicked queen, and Bumbleboozle really messed up her hair," said Wish in awed horror. "She's going to be absolutely hopping mad, isn't she, Bodkin?" "Absolutely hopping," said Bodkin gloomily. "I was very merciful," said Tsar. "If she wasn't your mother, I'd have killed her. Now, what did she say about the way to the Chamber of Magic Removal?" "Right down this corridor, and then it's the 7th door in the Great Cavern," said Bodkin promptly. They were riding on the backs of the snowcats, down through corridors that led them deeper, ever deeper underground, so low that the air was shiveringly cold, and a trembling Wish lay down further and further into Forest Heart's thick fur coat. Tsar could feel Squeeze Juice had gone rigid inside the package above his heart. If they didn't get him to this stone quickly, they would lose him entirely. The corridor eventually opened up into a great cavern lit by a flickering torchlight. Tiffin-Storm gave a horrified hiss and ducked behind Tsar.
"It's over there,"
she hissed. There were 7 doors leading off the cavern, and the 7th door had a faded sign above it saying, Chamber of Magic Removal. The doorway was crooked and not as large as they might have expected. If a giant wanted its magic removed, it would have to lie down in the cavern and stretch its arm through the door. A strange magnetic force seemed to want to pull Tsar towards that crooked door, like an ice-cold wind tugging him. And then he realised it was the sword hanging beside him, twisting round and pointing at the door as if it were an iron finger. Every single instinct in Tsar's bones was telling him, run away, go no further, stop here. Night Eye and Forest Heart and King Cat paced in anxious circles, growling and spitting and howling.
"Don't go in there! Don't go in there! Don't go in there! Don't go in there!"
hissed the sprites. But we have to go in, said Wish, getting down off Forest Heart's back. For the sake of the sprite, said Tsar, springing off King Cat. Wish put the key in the keyhole, and the door to Sycorax's chamber of magic removal swung open. Will they be in time to save Squeeze Juice? 17. Queen Sycorax's Chamber of Magic Removal. The Chamber of Magic Removal had a very high ceiling, and it was perfectly round. The only thing in it was a stone. The stone was a dark grey. It was just an ordinary but unbelievably large stone, rough around the edges like solidified lava. "Is that the stone that takes away magic?" asked Tsar in disbelief, for there didn't seem anything particularly scary about it. But the sprites and the animals were more sensitive to the strange atmosphere in the room, and they hissed like hornets in their anxiety, and the snowcats restlessly padded around the circular room, their hair all on end. Tsar reached into his breast pocket and took out Squeeze Juice, rigid as a dark green jewel, his breath like tiny green icicles rattling stiffly in his paralysed body. His light was dying, and barely there, growing fainter and fainter, like his breathing. "Now you have to put him on the stone," said Wish.
"You should not do this, sir,"
hissed Ariel, holding up his skinny arms and spitting out a warning.
"You have to listen to the stories of the fairies, stories from our ancient past. The fairy tales have wisdom in them."
Mustard Thought finished Ariel's sentence.
"And all the fairy tales say, do not touch the stone. My father's father's father told me in a story never to touch this stone,"
said Tiffin-Storm, and the other sprites echoed,
"And mine, and mine, and mine."
And the walls of the chamber echoed back the words that might have been the words of these sprites, or they could have been the ghost words of sprites who had been here once and faced the same choices in the past.
"And mine, and mine, and mine."
"The sprites are right," said Caliburn nervously. "You do have to listen to the stories, for stories always mean something. The question that worries me is, what exactly do they mean?" Now they were there, in front of the stone, confronted with the reality of actually touching it. Tsar found he was terribly torn about what to do next. The voice of the one sprite was singing, bright and pure as a nightingale, somewhere in the darkness above them, of his regret at the loss of his magic, of how his wings that used to brush the very stars on a windy winter's night were now paralysed, and the yearning ache of that song reminded them all exactly how big a decision this was. Tsar always knew what to do, but for once in his life, he wasn't sure. "What shall I do?" said Tsar, in an agony of indecision. "Maybe Squeeze Juice would actually prefer to go to the dark side rather than give up his magic entirely. Perhaps he'd think it would be better to die if it will mean he cannot fly. This is our only chance to save Squeeze Juice's life," said Wish. "What if you put him on the stone for just a second or two to take away the witch blood magic, but take him off very quickly again to leave him with enough magic to fly with?" "Might that work?" Tsar asked Caliburn. "Well, I can't guarantee it," said Caliburn. "I've never come across witch blood before." "But we have to be hopeful," said Wish. We can't just let him die. We have to hope that this will work, and we can make something good happen even in this dark place." "Help me," said Tsar to Wish. "I can't do it on my own." The 5 sprites and the hairy fairies formed a glowing halo above Tsar and Wish's head, alarmed and suspicious. Ariel spitting out words of protection like "Kvrkzbixtickle" and "Jerklickticksicklickle," and the spiky glowing letters quivered with fear and anxiety as they hovered in the air before melting away. Tsar and Wish took deep breaths and knelt by the stone, gently holding up Squeeze Juice, tipping him so that only the witch stain on his chest touched the surface of the rock. Tsar turned his face away, and then nothing happened. The poor little hairy fairy jerked a little and was still. "Do you think it's too late?" whispered Tsar, for Squeeze Juice's light had gone out entirely, and for 1 second he was like a stiff little piece of ivy lying there against the stone. And then, just when Tsar had thought he had lost him, a very faint twinkling of light flickered from Squeeze Juice's chest that grew brighter and brighter. The green slowly faded from the little sprite's legs, from his arms, and finally from his chest, so that with a sudden whoosh he took in air, and his eyes opened, and feebly he beat his wings. "He's alive!" breathed Wish in passionate relief as Squeeze Juice buzzed gently into life. "Quick, take him off the stone," said Tsar. Wish and Tsar peeled Squeeze Juice off, gently but firmly, and the little hairy fairy sat in Tsar's palm, blinking, dazed, as if awaking from a coma. "He's alive!" cried Tsar, punching the air as the little sprite breathed very, very quietly and whispered,
"I's alive! I's alive! I's alive!"
"He's alive!" smiled Tsar with passionate relief. "Do you think he can still fly?" "It's a little early to tell, Tsar," said Caliburn. "He's going to need some time to recover." Fairies are not like humans. The wildwoods are so dangerous they would have died out years ago if they did not recover quickly from illness. Bravely, Squeeze Juice raised his head, unfurled his shaking wings, and launched himself unsteadily into the air. "He can still fly!" cried Tsar. "I've made amends. It's all going to be fine. You see, Caliburn, for all your gloomy, what is done cannot be undone stuff, it is just like I said. Nothing is impossible. And that was perfect timing. I am so clever! Oh, the brilliance of me! It was such a great idea of mine to leave him enough magic so that he could fly." "Quick, Tsar," said Bodkin. "Put your own hand on the stone now to get rid of the witch stain, and then we can leave this horrible place." Tsar sighed. "Come on, Tsar," urged Caliburn. "You know this is the second part of our mission, and you must have learned something from this night. All of these bad things have happened because you tried to get bad magic from a witch." I know, said Tsar sadly. "But you have no idea how hard it is growing up in a world of magic when you have no magic of your own." "It is difficult, but you have seen what the witch blood did to Squeeze Juice. That is bad magic you have in your hand, and bad magic will go wrong." Okay, sighed Tsar. "I'll do it." Miracle of miracles, it seemed that Tsar really had learned something over the previous 2 days. Tsar knelt down and put his hand with the witch stain on it on the stone. It was a bizarre feeling, but it didn't take long. There was an electric quivering sensation in his palm, and it stuck to the stone as if magnetically attracted to it. For the next minute he could feel something being pulled out of him, and then the force went away, and when he lifted his hand off, there was no green stain any more. Tsar could not help sighing as he looked at it. For a moment he had been special, even if it was special in the wrong way. Now he was just ordinary, plain old Tsar again, way too old for his magic not to have come in. Caliburn landed on his shoulder and said sympathetically, "You did the right thing, Tsar. I'm proud of you. That was the wise, grown-up thing to do. I know it was difficult, but you have to wait patiently for your own magic to come in, and not just leap in and try to fix things immediately." "Yes, I know that, but it's so hard to do that," said Tsar sadly. "At least Squeeze Juice is cured," he said, to cheer himself up.
"I is,"
whispered Squeeze Juice, peering sleepily over the edge of Tsar's pocket.
"but why is we still all here in this creepy dungeon?"
"Good point," said Tsar. "Let's get out of here." Wish was kneeling right beside the stone in Tsar's way and trying not to panic. "Wish, I said come on." Wish did not answer him immediately. She swallowed. "I can't get my hands off the stone." 18. Oh dear, the story turns in an unexpected direction. There was a nasty silence. "What do you mean you can't get your hands off the stone?" said Tsar.
"I mean they're stuck. My hands are stuck to the stone."
"How is that possible?" exclaimed Bodkin in horror. What had happened was this. Wish had been kneeling down, helping Tsar hold Squeeze Juice against the stone, and as she got to her feet, she stumbled, clumsily as she often did. She put both hands out with flat palms against the stone to steady herself, and she could not get them off again. Puzzled, she tried to pull away, but the harder she pulled, the more stuck they were. Now she was kneeling down once more, both hands on the stone, her forehead pressed against the cold grey surface. Her hands were stuck to the stone like glue. She tried to move her little finger, but it would not budge. A not unpleasant, warm feeling was in her hands now, and she was beginning to feel a little sick. She was getting the oddest sensation. It was as if some compelling force from within the stone was dragging her inside out, emptying her like it was draining a bottle of wine.
"What's happening?" demanded Bodkin. "Why can't she get her hands off the stone? Has something gone wrong? What does this mean?"
"This is strange. Ever so strange," said Caliburn, extremely puzzled. Tsar and Bodkin tried to help Wish pull her hands away, but they were stuck fast. All that pulling and scraping at Wish's fingers did was make her fingers bleed, and she cried out for them to stop. The sprites could not use spelling, of course, in Sycorax's iron dungeons, so they just buzzed around wailing,
"You have to listen to the stories, listen to the fairy tales, don't touch the stone,"
which wasn't very helpful, frankly, since Wish already had touched the stone, so it was rather late to warn her not to.
"Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, what's going on?" wondered Bodkin uneasily. "There's something weird happening, I know there is. I wish we'd never come here. Are you all right, Wish? It's not painful, is it?"
"No," said Wish.
"It's not painful. I feel a bit sick, but it doesn't hurt."
Wish was feeling nauseous and confused and scared. It was very claustrophobic to be stuck in a horrible cavern in a dungeon 100 yards underground with your hands stuck to an enormous grey stone. Wish's imagination started playing tricks on her. What if she was stuck there forever? This was the problem with magic objects and why you had to be very careful about touching them. You never quite knew what the rules were. What if that was the moral of the fairy tales, that if you put your hands on the stone and you were the wrong kind of person, like a warrior rather than a magic person, you could never get them off again? 7 minutes passed. 8 minutes passed.
"What is happening?"
Wish kept repeating.
9 minutes. 10 minutes. "What is going on?"
said Caliburn, very bewildered. It was so hot in the room that sweat was rolling down Tsar's face in great wet tears, and his shirt was soaking wet. Stranger still, the heat seemed to be affecting the enchanted spoon. He drooped on the princess's shoulder, trying to comfort her, but almost bent double, poor Spoon, as if, in sympathy with her predicament, the life was being sucked out of him as well. The snowcats and the sprites sensed danger and formed a defensive circle around Tsar, the sprites holding up their arms, trying, and failing, to spell and curse with such intensity that the air bristled with frustrated magic. Wish was limp now, and frantic with trying not to panic.
"I'm not going to be stuck here forever, am I, Caliburn?"
"No, no," said Caliburn, trying hard to be reassuring. "No, not forever. Forever is a long word. I'm sure it's just a little hiccup, some small misunderstanding, and any moment now you'll be able to get your hands off." Wish's forehead was very near to the stone. Was it her imagination, Or did the rock in front of her seem to be getting lighter? Lighter and lighter, and somehow more transparent, as if the surface of the stone was just a membrane and she could see right into the stone itself. Oh, by mistletoe and oak and all things sweet and poisonous! As Wish looked, fascinated, mesmerised, she thought she saw an eye open somewhere in the heart of the stone. And a horrible little creaking voice whispered, "Hello, I've been waiting for you." Tsar stared open-mouthed. "The stone seems to be talking now."
"It's not the stone," gasped Wish. "There's something in there."
There was a moment of blinding, dazzling colour, and as Wish's eye adjusted, she was looking straight into the eye of an enormous witch, all curled up inside the stone, legs folded up underneath itself, like a large, dark grasshopper. 19. Magic can never be destroyed. It can only be hidden. In Canzo the Enchanter had a saying that Sycorax would have done well to remember. Magic can never be destroyed, it can only ever be hidden. How very true that saying was. For this was the secret of the stone that takes away magic. It was taking away magic for a reason.
"What is that?"
whispered Wish in absolute horror. "I," said the horrible, terrifying, creaking voice, "am the King Witch."
"Oh, eye of newt and toe of beastly frittering frog!" cursed Caliburn in horror. "Destiny has led us up the garden path. It's the wrong kind of star-cross. It's the universe in one of its trickiest moods. It's fate having a very bad day indeed."
It was indeed the King Witch, and it looked like fate had been playing a mischievous game with them. You see, wizards used to have a tradition of never writing anything down. The problem with that is, when the truth gets passed from mouth to ear over the course of a number of centuries, it can get deformed and fragmented along the way. It seemed like the sprites were right to be saying, "Do not touch the stone." It appeared like the fairy tales may have had a point. As Caliburn said, the trouble with stories is, you have to know what they mean. For now at last, the real secret of the stone was discovered. Here was the truth of it. Many centuries ago, the King Witch had been defeated in the last witch war and cast inside this stone. For hundreds of years, he had been soaking up the magic from outside, waiting and waiting. Queen Sycorax thought she was bringing the once magic people to the stone of her own free will. How could she dream that she was responding to the will of the witch inside the stone? That inside the very heart of the iron fort, quiet inside the grey rock, there was another heart, another will that was pulling, scheming, wishing and wanting with such dreadful invisible force, like a long-legged spinner in the centre of a grey great web.
"It's a witch! It's a witch! It's a witch! It's a witch!"
shrieked the sprites and the hairy fairies, climbing up the air in their fear, sending out little clouds of black terror smoke. "Give me your magic," whispered the King Witch. "Give me your magic. Give me your magic." "There must be some mistake," pleaded Wish, forcing herself to look at the horror inside the stone. "I'm afraid I don't have any magic to give you. I'm not a wizard. I'm just a very ordinary warrior princess. Please let me go." "Oh, but you do have magic," replied the voice of the King Witch. "Trust me, I know magic when I feel it. And the magic that you have isn't ordinary at all. It's a very special kind of magic, a magic that I have been waiting for a long, long time.
The kind of magic that works on iron.
Oh my goodness. "Get me off this stone!" yelled Wish at the top of her voice. Pandemonium in the Chamber of Magic Removal. Bodkin and Tsar hauled at Wish's fingers, but her hands would not budge. "It can't be true, can it?" wept Wish. "I'm a warrior. Warriors can't be magic. It's impossible." But there's no such thing as impossible, only improbable. And the moment that the King Witch had said those words, every single person in the room knew it must be true. It explained everything. It explained why Wish had been feeling a little different and peculiar lately. For the last couple of months, plenty of odd things had been happening to her. Needles wriggling to life in her hands, rugs inexplicably moving beneath her feet or curling up at the edges when she stepped on them. Objects she touched slipping through her hands like water or tingling with electricity when she put her fingers on them. Things that she thought she had put in one place, turning up unexpectedly in another. Her hair lifting up when she met particular people or entered certain rooms and softly wriggling itself into a bird's nest of tangles. Clothes ripping, shoes coming loose, keys going missing. She'd thought it was just her being forgetful and clumsy and absent-minded, even more useless than she generally was. But Wish was 13 years old. And that was the time when a person's magic first came in. "The spoon," whispered Bodkin to himself. A warrior who was magic. Inconceivable. But could it possibly be that the iron spoon had come alive because Wish's weird magic that works on iron was enchanting it? The character of the spoon drooping on Wish's shoulder, now Bodkin came to think of it, was very Wish-like, kind and loyal, a little reckless, a little odd. How could Wish enchant something without even knowing that she was doing it? Because magic is hard to control, particularly when you're not even aware you have it. And that was typical too. Of course, if Wish was going to be magic, it would be very Wish-like of her to have a magic that was so different from other people's. "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear," flapped Caliburn. "I knew we weren't asking the right questions. The questions we should have been asking are, why are the witches waking now? Why here? Why us? And the answer is, they are waking because Wish's magic has just come in." Caliburn was right. There are no coincidences. For centuries those witches had lain asleep, but they had indeed chosen this particular moment to wake from hibernation because they sensed that Wish had come into her magic, and it was something that they needed. "Give me the magic," chanted the King Witch inside the stone in that same dreadful, creaking, croaking voice. "Give me the magic that works on iron." "Why does he want it?" wept Wish, already knowing it was a question to which she didn't want to hear the answer. Caliburn had worked out why. "He's trying to get enough magic to break out of the stone," screamed Caliburn. "We have to get her off it." "Get me off this stone right now," yelled Wish again. "Tiffinstorm, try and spell her off the stone," ordered Tsar. "I'll have a go at pulling her again." Tiffinstorm hissed furiously, spitting with anger and irritation.
"Great galumphing, smelly human girl. You've gone mad, master. What we need to do now is get out of here. Things are about to get nasty."
"Obey me," said Tsar sternly. The sprites desperately riffled through their spell bags. Invisibility, love potions, cursing spells, flying, all small-time magic, useful for things in everyday life, but not for facing a great dark evil like a witch. They tried every wand in their quivers, the drivers, the number 4s, the number 5s, but of course their magic could not work anyway in a prison full of iron. The King Witch's horrible creaking voice got louder and louder, filling the room with horror.
"Give me your magic. Give me your magic. Give me your magic,"
chanted the witch, and the louder it chanted, the more panicky Wish became. "How do I use this magic to get away?" shouted Wish.
"Give me your magic. Give me your magic. Give me your magic."
You have to want something really, really bad. Wish for it. Spell it, Tsar replied. And then point it out with your hands. I can't, panted Wish, who was feeling so sick she wanted to give up and die right there. My hands are stuck to the stone. Why can't I get them off? It was so easy to take squeeze juice away. The witch will have let you take squeeze juice away, said Caliburn, hovering in terror over the stone, whereas it won't want to let you go at all. With her hands stuck to the stone, she couldn't perform magic independently of the witch, even if she had known how to perform magic in the first place. Any separate thought was being sucked out of her through those hands. She could feel the numbing effect of the witch's thoughts entwining with her own, as if she were being eaten by a large animal and was coming round to its point of view in the digestion process. After all, the warriors have sworn to destroy magic, so it is perfectly reasonable for witches to fight back, said her thoughts, and she did not know whether they were her own or the witches. Give me your magic. Give me your magic. Give me your magic. Wish could see right into the King Witch's body, where his 2 black hearts were beating, and every little artery was lit up like a tiny green network of roads, or the veins on a leaf. But there were other roads too. Roads of magic crisscrossing the King Witch's bright green arteries, tiny little paths winding through a white forest. Both the King Witch's palms were pressing right up against the stone on the inside, exactly opposite to where Wish's hands were stuck on the outside, and she could feel the magic flowing out of her fingers and into the hands of the King Witch in steady, rhythmic pulses in time to the beating of her heart. I wish to get away. I wish, wished Wish. Chaos in the chamber of magic removal as the hypnotic chanting of the witch grew deafeningly stronger, and the sprites let off their spells randomly, and the snowcats howled and roared. Fight it, cried Caliburn. Try with everything you have to break away. Be disobedient. Think of Tsar defying his father. Get angry, Wish, and fight back. Curse the witch. Don't give up your magic because you think that's what a warrior ought to do. Wish thought of Tsar earlier in the camp yelling at his father, and as she did so she could see the flow of magic going from her to the witch slowing. It's too late, said Bodkin. The stone is moving. The stone had begun to rock, gently at first, and then wilder, faster, wilder, faster. Oh, witches' whiskers and murmuring mistletoe and yellow toenails are the barmiest bog ogres in bogdom, thought Bodkin. The witch might have finally soaked up enough magic to break out of the stone. Leave, 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 shrieked the sprites and the hairy fairies, burning bright as meteors. But they couldn't leave Wish there on her own. Not Bodkin, not Tsar, not Caliburn, not the snowcats, not even the sprites. Sprites have a bad name for themselves. People say they are treacherous, flighty creatures who do not know the meaning of love or loyalty. But all I can say is, these sprites, despite their terror at the rocking stone, at the witch about to emerge, at the fear of death itself, stayed by their master's side. They were hissing and spitting like bonfires, but nonetheless they stayed. Without thinking, Tsar drew the enchanted sword. The light shone on the blade. Once there were witches, but I killed them. He held the sword up over his head, gave a great big yell, and plunged it right into the stone with all of his strength. Of course, that ought to be impossible. A sword made of iron to enter a stone. But that magic sword sank into the stone right up to the hilt, as if Tsar was plunging it into the earth. Every single strand of Wish's hair sprang up and shone like fire. A smell of burning hair added to the smoke of the room. The door of the chamber exploded out of its hinges and slammed into the opposite wall. Lightning shot off the surface of the stone, and Wish was catapulted off it. She shot backwards through the air and landed with a horrible thud at the back of the room. Little lines shot all over the surface of the stone, just like the lines that appear on an egg before a chick is born. "The stone is cracking!" screamed Tiffinstorm. "The stone is cracking!" The stone cracked from side to side. A great jagged split an inch wide zigzagged across the stone with the sword stuck in the centre of it. And out of that split, something slithered. 20. The story gets even twistier. At first, the something looked like a little slick of black oil leaking out of the stone, like the yolk leaking out of a broken shell. It couldn't be the King Witch, could it? For how could that thing they had seen inside there creep out of a split only an inch wide? Surely the witch must be dead, when a great big witch-killing sword has been driven right into the stone enclosing it. That must be the dead witch's blood leaking out of the broken stone. But in front of their eyes the pool of liquid grew larger and larger, and then the black water solidified, turned in front of their eyes into something flesh and blood that moved, a real and living body. A feathery, soggy scarecrow of a something, feathers soaking wet. Sometimes people like to reassure themselves that witches can't possibly ever have been as bad as the fairy stories said they were. One look at the King Witch told you that they were every bit as bad, and maybe even somewhat worse. Just looking at a witch had been known to scare a person to death. They can, of course, assume many forms, some of them quite pleasant, but mostly they find it helpful to look as scary as possible. The thing had a nose like a knife, so razor-sharp and pointy at the end that it looked like you could cut onions with it. There were just 2 black holes instead of eyes either side, like deep wells with something flinty and slimy as mercury glinting queasily at the bottom of them. The mouth dripping that revolting black saliva from the fangs. The jaws could unhinge to swallow a deer in one gulp. A body like a human mixed with a panther, and those black feathery wings. All in all, the King Witch was not a pretty sight. Power reeked from that slithering thing, as slowly he unfurled its wet black wings to their full extent, and they dripped on the dungeon floor, black smoking drips, as he lifted his beak and looked straight at Tsar and Bodkin. And then he vanished. "Where is it? Where is it?" said Tsar, whirling around. The animals howled in horror, the sprites opened up their fang-filled mouths and shrieked in fear, for there are few things more scary than an enemy you cannot see. Wish, over on the other side of the room, picked herself up, shaking. "Nobody panic," said Caliburn, panicking like crazy. "Where is it? Can anyone see it?" The 3 of them whirled round and round, trying to see the invisible witch. But there was nothing there. "It's going to attack Wish," said Tsar. He knew this. He wasn't sure why. Sure enough, the air above Wish seemed to thicken and darken. Bravely, the enchanted spoon standing on Wish's head turned to face that darkness. But an enchanted spoon is the sort of thing you might want on your side if you were making dessert, not if you are facing one of the most terrifying life forms that have ever walked this planet. Tsar tried to drag the sword out of the stone, but it was stuck fast, as if it had been rooted there all along. However hard he pulled, it would not budge. So with another blood-curdling yell, completely unarmed, Tsar, the boy who cared for nobody but himself, launched himself at the diving witch. As the witch screeched downward, diving at Wish, it was turning itself visible as it plunged. And turning yourself visible is not as easy or painless as lighting a candle. It looked, indeed, as if the atmosphere itself were being ripped apart like a curtain, as first the head appeared, half melting at the edges with black sparks and smoke, and then, with a terrible smell of burning feathers, the witch itself, screaming like a falcon. Wish ducked automatically. The witch had been aiming straight for her head, intending to tear it off. Dear little creatures, these witches, aren't they? But Tsar and the snowcats leaped the mightiest leaps they had ever leaped, and they caught the diving witch by his tail. So instead, the witch's talons scraped across Wish's face, ripping off her eye patch as the witch soared up into the air, and Wish yelled and put her hands over her head as she fell to the floor. With a furious scream, the witch shook off Tsar and the snowcats, swirling round viciously, and turned to attack the insignificant and irritating human boy who had shoved the sword in the stone and frustrated its pursuit of Wish. The witch smiled, and oh, by mistletoe and all things sweet and juicy and poisonous, a witch's grin is a terrible thing. He unhinged his jaws so that he could swallow Tsar in one gulp. The hot witch's breath reeked so revoltingly of rotten eggs and death that Tsar nearly passed out from the stink of it. At least I'm going to die gloriously, thought Tsar through his terror, not some kind of non-entity. I'll be the first person to be killed by a witch in hundreds and hundreds of years. How like Tsar to be thinking of fame and glory even at the point of death. The witch swooped. This time he would not miss. 21. Wishing. Bodkin shouted, "No!" Over in the other corner of the room, Bodkin saw Wish uncurl her hands from over her face. She lifted her head and she too shouted, "No!" The witch had torn off her eye patch and it had fallen to the floor. Wish's eye that was normally hidden underneath the eye patch was closed and there was a deep scratch over it. It was ever so slightly larger than the other eye, and all around the edge was a deep purple bruise, as if the poor human skin found the burning force of it difficult to bear. As Wish shouted, she opened her eyelid just a tiny, tiny crack, and the colour of the eye underneath was very odd indeed. It was a colour that no one had ever seen before, a hitherto unimagined colour. I can't describe it, apart from comparing it to other things. It was a colour that managed to be both warm and cold at the same time. A colour that reminded you of volcanoes, of thunderstorms, of electricity, of power. Wish could feel the power within her, and it was truly terrifying. A rage and a riot, a thunderstorm in her head, so violent it made her head ache, as if goblins were hammering it from the inside. The individual hairs on her head twitched upward vertically in the air. A confused, sickening wind ricocheted round the room, sending the sprites and the feathers and the dust bowling through the air, and the floor bent and shivered like it was a nauseous sea. In the depths of that extraordinary eye, strange clouds formed, like the beginning and the churning and the building of ideas, and there was a tiny snapping noise, and the magic screamed out of Wish's eye so forcefully you could see the impossible colour of it in the shape of a bent and twisted star hitting the witch at exactly the same moment that the witch pointed his taloned finger to shoot one piercing blast of white-hot magic back at Wish. And then the witch exploded into a mass of charcoal and black feathers. Bodkin and Tsar and the snowcats were blown off their feet. The dust and feathers of the witch fell through the air like dark rain. 22. Making amends and paying the price. The walls and the floor ceased their wild shaking and came to a shuddering halt with such violent abruptness that a few large stones fell out of the doorway. "Oh, my goodness, I don't believe it! I did it!" gasped Tsar in astonishment, raising himself onto one elbow, coughing and spluttering and staggering to his feet in the dust clouds, trying to catch the dropping feathers in his joy. "I killed the witch! Wake up, assistant bodyguard! Wake up!" Tsar gently prodded the prone body of Bodkin with his foot, for Bodkin had fainted once again with the shock of it. "I've killed the witch! I did it!"
"The witch is dead! The witch is dead!"
sang the sprites, joyfully turning somersaults in the air. Groggily, Bodkin came to, rubbing his head. "What happened?" "It exploded!" marvelled Tsar excitedly, for Tsar was a boy who loved an explosion. "It actually exploded! It was magnificent! The loudest explosion I have ever heard! I can't believe you missed it!" Tsar whooped joyfully and held out his hand to help Bodkin to his feet. "It exploded?" said Bodkin in a dazed way, reaching out a hand to catch one of the feathers still dropping through the wreck of the room. "Look," said Tsar, pointing at the feathers lying all around them. "That's all that's left of the witch. Wish's magic exploded it. But it was my brilliant sword thrust that would have made it weak enough for the explosion to work." He raised his fist in the air. "I am the boy of destiny! Feel my power!" "Oh, my goodness, we did it!" shouted Bodkin as he realised the enormity of what they had achieved. "We've killed the King Witch! Wizards and warriors working together!" Tsar and Bodkin hugged each other as the snowcats capered joyfully around them on the churned-up floor, howling with happiness. Yes, I have to admit, Wish, you were a bit of a help with that weird thing you did with your eye. What was that? Tsar turned to congratulate Wish. But Wish was not there. It was only then that they realised how silent it was. The walls were not shaking, the churned-up floor was perfectly still beneath their feet. And it wasn't only feathers that were falling quietly through the chamber and landing on the floor beneath them. There were also flakes like snowflakes, and each individual flake was a very unusual colour. Silence, apart from the gentle falling of black feathers, snow of an unusual colour, and dust.
"But where is Wish?"
said Bodkin in a bewildered way, looking round the room at the open doorway with the door blasted out of it.
"Did you see where she went?"
"Look, the door has come out of its hinges," said Tsar, "so maybe she ran out to fetch help or something." And then he noticed the spoon lying motionless in the centre of the floor. Tsar knelt and picked up the spoon. It was hard and cold now that all enchantment had gone from it. A perfectly ordinary iron dinner spoon. Carefully, Tsar laid it back down on the floor again. Silence in the chamber of magic removal. Caliburn flew to Tsar's shoulder with long, slow, reluctant wing beats and perched there in misery.
"I am so sorry, Tsar," said Caliburn, "but in the confusion I think you did not notice a second explosion nearly at the same time as the first. Wish was taken by surprise. She was shocked into letting down her guard. The King Witch let off a final burst of magic, and it hit her directly."
"She exploded as well as the King Witch," said Tsar, unable to believe it because he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. Impossible. Inconceivable. "Come back, Wish," thought Tsar fiercely. "Come back! I wish you would come back!" But he couldn't breathe life back into those fragments, however much he longed to. "Breathe! Be alive again! Move of your own accord!" But the strange coloured dust that was once Wish lay cold and still, and not any of Tsar's wishing could make it move again. Even the very greatest conjurer in the world could not do that. Actions have consequences. You must pay the price of making amends, and some things happen that cannot unhappen. Tsar cried. He and Bodkin knelt down in the room, and they cried together, their heads bowed, while the black feathers and the weird-coloured dust lay quiet and unmoving in a circle all around them. Even the sprites wept, and fairies do not cry. It was one of the things about them. They never, ever cry. But their tears dropped down onto the feathers and the snow. And then, through streaming eyes, Tsar thought he saw the edge of the spoon twitch. He blinked. Maybe it was an illusion. But no, there it was again, a definite wriggle of the outline of the spoon.
"What's happening?"
whispered Bodkin with round, wondering eyes.
"What's going on?"
whispered the sprites, gripping tight to their pin-sharp needles of wands. Their hair shot out electrically sharp. The room bristled once again with magic. The strangely coloured little flakes of Wish lifted themselves up from the floor. A great cloud of little fragments that sang like bird song as they flurried around in the air, shuffling and rearranging themselves as if they had some internal memory of exactly where in the infinitely complicated jigsaw puzzle that makes up a human being their tiny individual piece was supposed to be. They never bumped into each other, those millions and millions of tiny, dusty, ashy pieces flying around in a whirling flurry of animation, until they settled gradually onto the floor, forming the nose, eyes, ears, mouth, legs of Wish. Like they were creating a sculpture out of thin air, building life itself in front of Tsar and Bodkin's very eyes. For a second, the perfect sculpture was still, dead, perfect but inert, the robotic outline of what once had been Wish. But above Tsar and Bodkin's heads, the last fragments of wish were forming themselves into the shape of a human heart, suspended in the air. "Look," breathed Tiffin-Storm, pointing above them, and Tsar caught his breath. "That's impossible," thought Tsar. "I can't be seeing that." A flying heart. The small brown heart descended from above, rather fast in a hurry, and plunged softly through the chest of Wish lying on the floor. And Wish sat straight up like a wooden automaton and took a huge gulp of air, gasped it like she was drinking in life itself, and went from death to life in a shaking, spluttering, ugly with spittle and phlegm moment. Wish sat upright, gasping for breath. What happened? "She's alive!" 23. When the adventure is over, the problems begin. "She's alive! She's alive! She's alive!" Around the room they danced now with even greater jubilation than before, the enchanted spoon doing mad pirouetting circles. "Oh, my feathers and beak and tail!" breathed Caliburn. "Thank goodness for that! For one horrible moment I thought it was all going to go dreadfully wrong, and fate and the universe had given us the worst bad hair day of all. But she's alive!" Wish staggered to her feet in the clouds of dust. "I'm fine," said Wish shakily. "I'm fine." With her hair up in all directions, in an enormous electric ruff, she looked like a piratical sea urchin. "Quick, put your eye patch back on," said Bodkin, bending down, picking up the eye patch from the dusty floor and hurriedly handing it to her, for the uncovered magic eye was making the walls shake again. As soon as Wish put the eye patch back on, the floor stopped heaving. The walls straightened. "What happened there?" asked Wish, finding it difficult to keep her balance. "It was incredible," shouted Tsar. "Unbelievable, impossible, inconceivable." "What we have just witnessed," said Caliburn in impressive tones, "is one of the most extraordinary sights in the entire universe. That of a great enchanter regenerating themselves." "What on earth are you talking about?" blinked Wish. "You're alive!" shouted Bodkin. "You died, but you're a great enchanter, so you have more than one life." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," said Wish. "I wasn't dead. I just fell over for a second there." "You were in pieces," said Tsar joyfully. "Tiny little pieces all over the room, and then you came back together. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen." "Nonsense," said Wish, a little more uncertainly. For what with one thing and another, she was feeling a little untogether, as you would be if you had just been taken apart and put back together again rather rapidly. "That's impossible. What are you saying? You're saying that I can die and come back to life," said Wish. "Yes, but there's a catch," said Caliburn. "Even great enchanters are made of flesh and blood, and that wears out after a while. So you have to be careful of your lives, Wish, for you do not know how many you will have." "Okay," said Wish, finding all this a little difficult to take in. "And what about my eye?" "It must be a magic eye," said Caliburn. "Extremely rare, very powerful. I've only ever seen that twice before in all my lifetimes, and never that colour. That must be the colour of magic that works on iron." "Hang on a second," said Tsar crossly. "The person who has magic that works on iron is the boy of destiny. Wish can't be the boy of destiny. She's a girl, for starters." "Nobody says the person of destiny has to be a boy, Tsar," said Caliburn. "This isn't the Dark Ages, you know." "Well, it was, actually, but nobody ever thinks they are living in the Dark Ages." "But I don't understand," said Wish. "I've taken my eye patch off loads of times, and trust me, nothing like that has ever happened before." "Yes, well, you've only just turned 13, so the magic will only have just come in, won't it?" said Caliburn. "So not only am I magic," said Wish, very, very upset, "but it's a really weird kind of magic, and it's all my fault that these witches are waking." "Well, not your fault exactly," said Caliburn. "However, if the witches could get hold of the magic that works on iron, then they might have a hope of rising once again. They know from centuries of bloody wars that without that power they cannot defeat the warriors. That is what they have been waiting for all these years." Shoot. This was bad. Really bad. It's not a pleasant thought to think that the most terrifying creatures on earth want to target you in particular. Wish was feeling very conflicted about all this. On the one hand, it was, of course, a disaster for a warrior to suddenly discover she was magic. But on the other, in the past she had always been Wish, a word which, when spoken, was accompanied by a sigh of disappointment. Sycorax's very ordinary seventh daughter, a little bit clumsy and a little bit blind, who was trying and failing to be a warrior like her sisters. But now she had discovered she was Wish, a quite different sort of word, a word that was another name for magic itself, and this new Wish was an individual of some considerable specialness, who might look ordinary on the outside, but on the inside had a glorious, if rather dangerous, secret.
"We can think about all this stuff later. In the meantime, it's all worked out," said Tsar joyously. "We've saved Squeeze Juice, Wish is alive, we killed the King Witch, I've broken that horrible stone and made amends. Everything ends happily. I knew it would all turn out right in the end."
He turned triumphantly to Caliburn.
"You see, that wasn't so hard, was it?"
"Oh, Tsar," said Caliburn, shaking his head.
"You're going to be the death of me. These adventures of yours are very, very bad for my heart."
Bodkin stared at them all in awe. In the last 5 minutes he had rocketed so violently from terror to despair to rapturous joy that he felt as if a great grey ogre had been rattling him in a bucket.
"You mean," he whispered in awe, "you have experiences like this on a regular basis?"
"All the time," sighed Caliburn. "This was a particularly bad one, admittedly."
Bodkin looked around the devastated room. Sycorax's precious chamber of magic removal ruined, the floor a mess of rubble, the stone exploded, the door blown off its hinges, the scrape of witches' talons on the door frame. An ancient peril, the witches, dead for hundreds of years, woken up and come out into the world once more.
"What do you mean, worked out?" said Bodkin. "I don't call this worked out. It's a mess, a total mess. The witches are out there," said Bodkin, "and it's all our fault. I should never have let the princess out of the fort. I should have told the grown-ups."
Wish gently patted him on the shoulder.
Now, Bodkin, you're being too hard on yourself. It's not all our fault. The witches were out there anyway. They were always there. We just couldn't see them. We have to look on the hopeful side, and look how much we learned from this adventure." Wish continued. "Warriors and wizard fought a King Witch side by side and defeated it. That has to be a good sign for the future."
They left the sword in the stone, for it would not budge, even when Wish pulled it. Fate didn't seem to think that either of them was ready to wield that sword.
"I don't understand," said Tsar, bewildered. "We need that sword more than ever, now that witches have returned to the forest."
"But the sword is a bit wayward, isn't it?" said Caliburn. "And we don't really understand its secrets yet, so maybe this is the right place for it at the moment."
Caliburn might be right, for goodness knows where you could safely conceal and imprison an enchanted sword that seemed to have a mind of its own, and wanted to kill witches, and could pick locks, and slice through floors and ceilings. And if even Queen Sycorax, who was a prison expert, couldn't work out a solution of how to contain it, well, the stone was probably as safe a place for it as any, for the moment. They left a note for Sycorax by the sword and the stone. Wish wrote it, so the spelling was a little erratic. "Dear Queen Sycorax, I have returned your sword. Do not touch the blade, if you are ever able to take it out. It may be stained with witch blood. Sorry. Best wishes, Tsar, son of Incanzo, Grand Wizard of Forever." It wasn't hard to find the once magic people that Sycorax had imprisoned. You just had to follow the noise, and as soon as they entered their dungeon, the singing ceased, and the once magics stared at them, unable to believe they were there. The giant Crusher raised his shaggy head.
"Tsar," he roared, "you've come to save me. I knew you would."
"Of course I have," said Tsar, conveniently forgetting that if Wish hadn't pointed it out, he wouldn't even have noticed Crusher was missing.
"Because I am a leader, and that is what a leader does."
One look at that giant's kindly, innocent face crinkling up in delight as Tsar hugged his ankle made everything worthwhile for Wish. The imprisonment of the once magic people was wrong. She could tell it was wrong. Her mother was mistaken. Not wicked, like Tsar said she was, of course not, but mistaken nonetheless.
"Let's get out of here!"
roared Tsar, punching the air. But to Tsar's surprise, the once magic people were not so keen to escape as he expected. They stood there, even the loudest of the Hobbs, rather silent and depressed, as if the air had leaked from a balloon, and the poor sprites, who had lost their ability to fly, were so mortified they ran away, scuttling like mice across the prison floor.
"They're ashamed, Tsar," explained Caliburn, "for what is a giant without his size? What is a sprite without her wings?"
They were like warriors returning from battle, terribly wounded, these poor people, and they no longer knew how they would fit into the world of the magic. But Tsar coaxed them out. He jumped up on a rock in the centre of the dungeon.
"Don't be embarrassed, everybody," cried Tsar. "I am Tsar, boy of destiny, and at present, it seems, due to some weird divine oversight that I don't understand, even I have no magic yet. I have come to rescue you, and I will take you back to my father in Kanzo, the greatest enchanter who has ever lived, and I am sure he will be able to restore your magic."
"I don't think you should be promising them that, Tsar," said Caliburn. "I'm not sure that's possible." But the promise offered hope to these people. The thought of magic being returned to them brought a shine even to the dullest and most crestfallen boggart or will-o'-the-wisp's eye. Crusher the giant scooped up the little sprites who could no longer fly and kindly offered them a lift in his pockets. Or they perched like little nits in his hair, and the gradually growing larger party galloped and sprang and ran through the corridors back to the Chamber of Magic Removal, because that was where they could pick up the path to the secret exit. At the Chamber of Magic Removal, the little party stopped.
"This is where we part," said Bodkin.
"Come with us, Wish," said Tsar. "Come back to our camp. You can be magic there."
Tsar and Wish had met in a crossing of paths and stars in the forest only 24 hours earlier. Here, deep in the underground prison, was another crossing of the ways, and Wish had to decide which way to go. One way, the sprite dust trail of light led back through the dungeon maze and up to Sycorax's hill fort. The other way, a tall, dark corridor led towards the secret exit and out into the forest, and that was where Tsar and the magic creatures were going. It was extremely tempting to take that path, for it seemed like the path of excitement and wildness and magic and snowcats. But "I can't leave home," said Wish. "I'm only 13. This is my home. And my mother isn't as bad as you think she is."
"Your mother is a very dangerous person," said Tsar.
Even though Bodkin wanted Wish to come back up to the fort with him, in all honesty, he had to agree with Tsar.
"Remember those heads in that chamber? Those spelling books piled high in the cells? Sycorax is trying to be a sorceress, Wish."
"Murmuring mistletoe, do you think that's true?" gasped Wish. "But how can she, when she's the one who always goes on about how bad magic is and how we should fight against it?"
Yes, Sycorax had plenty of secrets, and Wish had learned rather more about her mother than she wanted to know.
"But she's trying to do the right thing. I know she is. And my mother deserves a second chance," said Wish stubbornly. "We all deserve a second chance, don't we?"
"Wish is right. She should stay here," said Caliburn, thinking not so much of giving Sycorax a second chance, but of the many evil people, wizards and worse, who might like to get their hands on magic that works on iron.
"Wish's magic is so powerful it will be better off for the moment in the protection of Warrior Fort. In fact, now I come to think of it, the warriors have to keep Tsar's spelling book, just in case."
"Oh, that's so kind of you, Caliburn," said Wish, "but I won't be needing it." She gave a little shiver. "I'm not going to be doing any more magic for the moment, not till I can persuade everyone in the warrior tribe that magic isn't as bad as they think it is."
"No," whispered Bodkin urgently, even though he was absolutely longing to look again at the pictures, at the stories, the recipes, the spells, the whole wonderful world of magic in that book.
"No, Wish shouldn't have magic things anymore. Look at all the trouble that beastly spoon and the enchanted sword has got us into.
Wish is a warrior princess, and she needs to give all this magic stuff up. Caliburn gave him an affectionate look. Ah, magic can be concealed, magic can be hidden, but giving magic up, that is very hard indeed. Look what just happened here in this fort. However, the kind of magic Wish has, admitted Caliburn, is so dangerous and so special that it is probably better for you to conceal it. Nobody must ever find out, or Wish will be in terrible danger. There is a lot to be said for the nice, quiet, ordinary life of a warrior princess. She is very lucky to have you, Bodkin, as her guardian angel. Bodkin blushed. I don't know what you're talking about. What is an angel? Is it something like a sprite? A little, said Caliburn. Remember, I cannot stress this more strongly. No one must ever find out about this. That's why you need this book. There are many, many useful chapters in there about concealing and hiding your magic from others. And if, by some unlucky chance, dangerous people start going after you, people with wicked hearts and deep spells and strong magic of their own, why then this book may save your life. Wish took the book from the bird. It was in a terrible state, burned and stained with pages dropping out like confetti. You can write in it too, said Caliburn. Write your own story, and that always helps if you're trying to keep a secret. Take a feather from my back, there's one that's about to fall out, and keep it with you all the time. Wish drew the falling out feather from Caliburn's back and placed it carefully inside the spelling book, and put the book in a pocket in her cloak. Goodbye, Squeeze Juice, said Wish, as the sprite hovered crossly in front of her. I hope you get well soon, and you fly just as well as you ever did.
I don't know why you don't want to come back to wizard camp with us, but I don't care,
grumped Squeeze Juice, crossly tweaking her hair and pinching her nose and giving her little bites like stinging nettles.
You have a face like a warthog, and you were stinkier than a cowpat.
Oh, you're cursing me. That's wonderful, Squeeze Juice. You must be feeling better, said Wish delightedly. Squeeze Juice looked dolefully into her eyes.
But why are you staying? Come with us. Don't make me sad.
I'm so sorry, Squeeze Juice.
Never mind,
hissed Ariel, her eyes spitting with malice.
We'll miss you, but we'll get over it, won't we, Mr. Thought? They can stay here in their lumping great fort of dullness forever.
Ariel waved her thorny arms and spat out a few words that sounded like Kiskinterkler Bertibut and Kicker. They did not sound friendly. Goodbye, Tsar, said Wish. Goodbye, said Tsar, whistling carelessly, his hands in his pockets, for he did not want anyone to think he was upset. And then they parted ways. Tsar and his magic creatures ran and flew down the corridor, the sprites trailing beautiful little snakes of light that spelled words like goodbye and don't come back and beware and good riddance. Wish and Bodkin watched them until they vanished into the darkness, singing songs that were eventually too far away to hear. And then, sadly, Wish and Bodkin went in the other direction, up to where the guard was still sleeping at the dungeon entrance, and then back through the fort they tiptoed, carefully avoiding the night watchman. Meanwhile, Tsar and his once magic people took every second left-hand turning till they got to Queen Sycorax's secret exit, an enormous door which must have been constructed by the quick, clever hands of hob-elves, for it was not only huge but slanting inwards from the slope of the hillside outside. It was a wonder, really, that it could be a secret, for the door was large enough for a giant to get in and out if they merely bent their head a little. Once they got there, it was far easier to break out of the fort than it had been to break in. Tsar did an impression of Queen Sycorax, shouting, "Open up and be quick about it! The password is control!" And a guard standing on the other side opened the door, which was wood on one side and turfed like grass on the other, and they all trooped out. Tsar was wearing that very distinctive red royal cloak, so the guard assumed that what looked like Queen Sycorax on the outside was Queen Sycorax on the inside as well. The guard did not seem surprised to see his queen going out of the fort in the company of a giant and a whole load of once magic people. He merely sent a hand signal up to the sentries up at the battlements to let them know not to shoot. "Nobody run," whispered Tsar, for he could feel the snowcats quivering by his side. "We mustn't look frightened. If we look scared and start running away, then they'll suspect something is wrong." All the sentries saw was someone wearing Sycorax's red cloak in the middle of the party, as the soft tread of the snowcats made paw prints in the snow, and Tsar and his magic creatures strolled quietly away from the fort and into the forest, the sprites blinking out like snuffed candles as soon as they hit the sky. Tsar only relaxed once he and the snowcats had reached the safety of the cover of the trees. He looked back at the fort. The door had been shut, and no one would guess there was a door there unless they knew it already, and the little ant-like figures of the sentries on the battlements did not look even remotely alarmed or agitated. It was almost as if Queen Sycorax made a habit of surreptitiously coming in and out of that secret entrance with all sorts of strange magic people and things, without the citizens of the fort knowing anything about it, despite the fact that magic was very strictly banned by order of herself. She was an interesting woman, that Queen Sycorax, but tricky, very tricky. 24. What They Didn't See. It wasn't only Tsar and the magic creatures who escaped into the midnight of the forest. As soon as Tsar and Wish and Bodkin had left the chamber of magic removal, there was silence for a second. And then a strange wind crept up inside the room, although it is impossible for a wind to blow inside. The black feathers and the dusty fragments of the king witch lying all around began to blow about restlessly. For you see, every light has its dark. Day only exists with night. Wish died and came back to life, did she not? For it turned out she was a great enchanter, and great enchanters have more than one life. But there was more than one great enchanter in the room. If Wish could come alive again, so, too, could the king witch. Slowly, 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 the millions and millions of king witch fragments rose up into the air, making a strange, sweet humming noise, and the tiny individual bits whizzed around at tremendous speed, like a swarm of bees, shuffling and reshuffling themselves, just like they had with Wish, as if they had some internal memory of where they were supposed to be. And a strange singing filled the room, sweet and evil all at the same time. How many times this witch's life? How many times must it be killed? How many lives must yet be left? Risk it all, risk it all, risk it all. Not even a great enchanter knows exactly how many lives they have, so it is always chancy to risk one in case that was the last one you had. But it appeared that the king witch had one more life left to him, at least. Up, up, and up the feathers and fragments rose, and as they rose, they joined back together again in the dark and dangerous form of the king witch. One of his wings was fractured and hanging limply, but he was very much alive. Semetemos oiu eva ot esol a eltapni redro ot new et raw, croaked the king witch, which means sometimes you have to lose a battle in order to win the war. The witch gave an unintelligible shriek, and then he made himself invisible again, melting into the air like smoke. He flew back through the broken doorway. He was weak, so weak after the fight and the being trapped in a stone for centuries and the wounding from the witch-killing sword. He needed to get away, to rest, before he could attack again. So he lurked like an invisible bat, flying above everyone's heads as Tsar and his magic creatures ran along the corridors. When they escaped through Sycorax's secret door, the invisible witch escaped too. And out into the world the king witch flew, slowly turning visible as he reached the trees. 25. Mother and Daughter. Bodkin and Wish parted ways at the door of Wish's house in the middle of the fort. Wish lived in a house all on her own, for princesses were so grand they had houses all to themselves, which was a little lonely, but showed their status. Bodkin was feeling surprisingly gloomy, for now it was all over. He was a hero no more, just an ordinary assistant bodyguard. It had been one stolen day, one glorious 24 hours where he could ride and fight beside a princess, just as if he were her equal and a proper warrior himself. "Now," Bodkin said to Wish, trying to sound more cheerful than he felt, "we can all get back to normal, Princess. You give me the spoon and I'll take it back to the kitchen, where it can return to life being an ordinary dinner spoon. It's time to give up magic things, just like you promised me."
"Yes," said Wish thoughtfully, "but then I have still got the spelling book, haven't I? Maybe I'll give up the spoon tomorrow."
"All right then," agreed Bodkin. "You promise you will tomorrow?"
"I promise," said Wish.
"Good night, Wish," said Bodkin. "Good night, Spoon."
"Good night," said
Wish, shyly shaking Bodkin's hand. Princess," said Bodkin, for something had been bothering him, "that fainting thing that happened a little bit tonight, you don't think that's going to be a problem, do you, with my future in bodyguarding?"
"Is there any other profession you would be interested in?"
asked Wish tactfully.
"Well, yes, as it happens, I've always wanted to be a fool, and I'm quite good at the whole storytelling thing,
But that's not the point," said Bodkin.
"The point is, all my family have been bodyguards, so I have to be one. And am I going to be any good at it with a slight fainting issue?"
"I'm sure you'll grow out of that," said Wish.
"Tomorrow, maybe. But in the meantime, look what brilliant bodyguarding you just did. You are a hero and a very good friend."
"I am not a hero. I am an assistant bodyguard," said Bodkin, very relieved. "And that is what an assistant bodyguard is for, to assist."
But he didn't deny that he was the princess's friend. And then they both went to bed. The princess to her royal bed of goose-down feathers, the assistant bodyguard to his bed of straw underneath the kitchen table. They both slept soundly, for it had been a tiring night, what with one thing and another. But everything cannot be the same as it always was, of course. Once an assistant bodyguard has been on an adventure like that one, he is changed forever. Like the enchanted spoon, he had been burned at the edges by witches' fire and scorched by the breath of sprites. He had opened his eyes in the wizard's camp. He had listened to the speech of ravens, and they had made him see things from their point of view. I may have said this before, but this can be the problem with adventures, which is why Bodkin's father was so very, very against them. Meanwhile, Sycorax had a long, long night all alone in that darkness, and she had plenty of time for thinking. Who knows? She may have even learned a lesson or two. That is, after all, what a dungeon is for. And when, eventually, the guard woke up and unlocked the prison cell where she was trapped, Queen Sycorax ran out the door and straight to the chamber of magic removal, for she had heard the commotion of the night before, and she had imagined all sorts of terrible possibilities about what might be happening. She saw the stone, the sword, she read the note, and that chilly queen turned colder still. Queen Sycorax was no fool. The note said it was from Tsar, but the handwriting on the note, the spelling, made the queen immediately think of Wish. She ran, not even gliding this time, to the platform, up to the surface, through the streets of the hill fort, passing the staring eyes of her citizens, her beautiful golden hair an absolute bird's nest shock of electric horror that would take her a week to brush out, and she was lucky to be able to brush it out at all. Sometimes sprites can mess up your hair with such intricate magic that the only solution is to cut it off entirely. She ran straight to the house where Wish lived. Queen Sycorax did not often go there, for queens are very busy and they do not always have time to visit their children like normal people. Bursting into Wish's room, Sycorax found her daughter fast asleep, snoring on the bed,
and the Queen let out a sigh of relief. Relief quickly turned to anger, as so often it will. She gave her daughter a gentle shake to wake her up. Wish opened a sleepy eye and was instantly electrically awake when she saw her mother standing over her like an enraged iceberg. Oh dear. "Good morning, Mother," gulped Wish, wearily. "The wizard boy has gone," said Queen Sycorax in a white, cold fury, taking in the scratches on Wish's face, the wildness of Wish's hair, which, like Queen Sycorax's own hair, was still whipped up into a frenzy of tangles by the sprites using it as a nest. "Escaping with all the other magic creatures, chaos, disorder, anarchy. The stone that takes away magic is broken." "And I've lost the sword as well," stormed Sycorax. "It's trapped in the stone at a time when it is needed most. When witches have returned to the forest, it's an all-round disaster. Someone must have stolen my key. Someone must have helped that wretched wizard boy escape. Someone must have taken him the sword. The someone who has done this is a traitor to their mother, their family, their entire tribe of warriors." Wish avoided her mother's angry gaze and looked thoughtfully into the distance. "I just had this very strange dream," said Wish. "I dreamed there was a witch inside the stone that takes away magic that called itself the King Witch." Sycorax stared in astonishment. Her anger evaporated and turned to uneasy alarm. "A King Witch inside the stone?" gasped the Queen. "What nonsense are you talking? Impossible! Surely that's impossible!" But if witches were not extinct, that meant the legends about the King Witch might be correct as well. In all the old fairy tales, the King Witch was the leader of witches, the mastermind who controlled them all. In my dream, the King Witch had been inside the stone for a very long time indeed. Who knows, maybe someone long ago imprisoned him in there to make the world a safer place, said Wish. The fairy stories about the stone always say not to touch it, don't they? But the meaning of why we are not supposed to touch it has been lost. Centuries and centuries that King Witch must have been willing people to come to the stone so he could take away their magic and break out of the stone. And he will have been working his will on you too, Mother, on me, on Tsar, on all of us. In my dream, the King Witch broke out of the stone. No, whispered Sycorax with fierce, bright eyes. But she was thinking hard. Wish could sense her mother weakening. So she carried on, speaking thoughtfully and innocently, looking dreamily into the distance. Another odd thing in the dream, continued Wish, was that in the dungeons below us there was this room full of heads. But they weren't just any old heads. They were heads that I recognised, of people that came to court and argued on your behalf, Mother, or said nice things about you when you were away. I'm not sure we would want the citizens of Warrior Fort to know about those heads, Mother, said Wish. Dreams are odd things, said Sycorax, staring at her daughter very, very closely indeed. Mother and daughter looked at each other, their faces identical masks. Behind both those masks they were thinking, what do you know? For the first time they looked surprisingly alike. Hair in ridiculous upward waterfalls, faces carefully arranged to give nothing away, wary eyes. It's complicated, said Queen Sycorax at last. Yes, it is, said Wish. She put out her hand and closed it over Queen Sycorax's icy one. It must be difficult being a queen, said Wish. Queen Sycorax returned the pressure. Yes, it is, said Queen Sycorax. What happened to the witch inside the stone? Where is it now? Asked Queen Sycorax. We killed it with the sword, said Wish. In the dream, of course. Said Queen Sycorax. You were lucky to survive. She touched her daughter's face with the scratches on it. Queen Sycorax looked down at Wish, and for one split second her mask dropped, and there was no disappointment in her eyes, but a wary respect, suspicion, and fear. Queen Sycorax would never underestimate her daughter again. Her frosty cliff of a face melted into a glint of a smile, like the sun appearing through clouds over a glacier. "Well done, Wish," said Queen Sycorax. "That must have been a very frightening dream. A nightmare, in fact, and it sounds like you have dealt with it in a very warrior-like fashion." Wish was so relieved she beamed right back at her. My mother smiled at me. Queen Sycorax's smile disappeared, and she was her brisk, composed self once more. She adjusted Wish's eye patch, which had gone a little askew. "I may have made a mistake about that stone," admitted Queen Sycorax. "Even queens make mistakes sometimes. So in these very special circumstances, I am prepared to overlook whatever happened this past night." Queen Sycorax's voice turned diamond hard. "But in the future, you do need to do as I tell you. I want you to have no contact with anything magic whatsoever. No wizards, no magic creatures, not even the smallest itch sprite. Do you understand me, Wish?" "Yes, Mother," said Wish. "And if you see that wretched, tricksome Tsar, son of Incanzo," said the Queen, "you must tell me at once. You hear me?" "Yes, Mother," said Wish. But underneath the bedclothes, I am afraid to say, I happened to know that Wish was crossing her fingers. "From now on, Wish, you must work hard at being a normal warrior princess. You can start by keeping this eye patch on at all times, nice and straight, remember?" said Queen Sycorax sternly as she got to her feet. "We are warriors." She held up her finger. "And a warrior should always be well turned out," said Queen Sycorax. "Every hair in place, every weapon sharpened, every fingernail shining. Remember that." And then she swept out of Wish's front door, where a crowd had gathered, watching in staggered silence as Sycorax, her long white gown raked ragged, her hair a fright, swept through the courtyard with all the dignity and gravitas as if she was at her own coronation. Guards scurried up to her to offer their cloaks, and in one superb gesture she waved them away, every inch a queen. Someone started applauding, nervously, they weren't quite sure why, and the other warriors joined in, even though they did not know what they were clapping for. What had happened? Who had dared attack her? What on earth, for the green god's sake, was going on with that hair? And then she turned at the entrance to her own quarters. The crowd grew silent. They leaned in to hear what she would say, expecting her to tell them the story of exactly what had happened down there in her dungeons. "I never," said Queen Sycorax in her quiet, mild voice, "want anyone to mention this ever again." And they didn't. 26. Father and Son. Meanwhile, Incanzo the Enchanter was pacing the great hall, distraught with fear, for although he had sent out search party after search party looking for Tsar, the boy had not yet been found. The day before, when Incanzo the Enchanter and his wizards burst into Tsar's room, they found it empty, and a great hole in the middle of it. And as Incanzo knelt down by the side of the hole, and saw the dead witch lying at the bottom, and his son vanished, "Well, what have I done?" the enchanter asked himself, imagining for one terrible moment that the witch might have killed his son, before realizing to his infinite relief that no, quite incredibly, it was the other way around. Luther peered over his father's shoulder and turned a little white. "What is that, father?" "That," said Incanzo grimly, "was a witch." By mistletoe and leaf mould and the ginger sideburns of the great grim ogre. Witches weren't extinct after all. And the proof was right there, in the middle of Tsar's bedroom. It took a while for the wizards, crowding into the wrecked ruins of this room, to take all this in. "You see," said Ranter triumphantly, for even when something really dreadful has happened, there is always a satisfaction in being right all along.
"I told you that the boy would do something truly appalling in time, and he has. Witches are not extinct, and after hundreds of years of peace, Tsar has brought a witch right here into Wizard Camp."
It was somehow typical that it would be Tsar who found one.
"How could Tsar have killed this witch?" asked the enchanter, with a sort of reluctant admiration. "Witches are virtually impossible to kill."
"Well," admitted Luther slowly, "he did cheat in that spelling competition by bringing in this whopping great big iron sword thingy that he said he had stolen from the warriors."
"Was it a sword of power?" gasped the enchanter.
"It looked pretty ancient," said Luther, "and I think he did mention something about it being a witch-killing sword. But you know what Tsar's like. He lies his head off all the time."
"Why didn't you tell me about that?" raged the enchanter, turning on Luther as the lightning of his fury crackled around the devastation of Tsar's room. So now, 24 hours later, the enchanter was pacing up, down, hoping against all hope that Tsar might yet be found. Luther was not particularly enjoying how distressed everybody seemed to be at the loss of Tsar. Even Ranter was sighing and saying things like, "He was a good boy, really. Lively, of course, mischievous, but he meant well."
"This is all Tsar's fault," said Luther sulkily. "He brought the witch here, it serves him right."
But the enchanter was blaming himself. "What did the boy say to me just before I banished him to his room?" thought Incanzo.
"You do not care about me. You only want a son who is magic."
Incanzo wanted to be able to tell his son that was not true. But it was too late. His son was not there. Incanzo had been up all night in the form of a peregrine falcon and had flown low over the treetops, mile after weary mile, searching for his son. But Tsar was an expert at covering his tracks, so even the bright red eyes of the falcon, peering deep down into the leafy blackness, could spot no sign of the boy, however hard they looked. Incanzo had consulted his star maps, so scorchingly long that his eye-beams burned holes in them. But Tsar was hidden in a fort of iron, so peer how the enchanter may, there was no sign of the boy there either. It was as if he had vanished off the face of the earth. And then the enchanter began to think the unthinkable. Nobody knew much about witches. What if, just before it died, the witch had dispatched the boy and made Tsar's corpse disappear in some manner unknown to Incanzo? The enchanter had sent Tsar to his room to teach him a lesson, but as so often seems to happen, the lesson being taught was to the enchanter himself.
"I wish I had not shouted at the boy. I wish I had listened to him, not threatened to expel him. I wish he may not have died without knowing that I love him," thought Incanzo, the great enchanter. But even a very great enchanter cannot turn back time. There was a shout at the doorway. The pacing enchanter turned eagerly. It was him. It was Tsar. There he was, climbing off Night-Eye, his snowcat, looking a little guilty, a little unsure of his reception, but still as cheeky and irrepressible and full of himself as ever, maybe even more so. All-powerful enchanters are, at heart, still parents like the rest of us. Incanzo, the great enchanter, ran to his son on trembling legs, and with pathetic eagerness and relief, he scooped Tsar up in his arms. "Tsar, you're alive, and you've come home!" cried Incanzo, the great enchanter. "I have," said Tsar, grinning with surprise from ear to ear, for he had been expecting expulsion at the worst, and at the best a few awkward questions, which was what normally happened when he made it back from an adventure.
Sorry about the dead witch, father, and my room, and I've lost my spelling book again. But look!"
Tsar beckoned to the giants, the wizards, the dwarves and sprites that he had rescued from Sycorax's dungeons to come forward. The crowd gathered in wizard camp, gasped as they recognized family members, friends and colleagues that they thought they would never see again. They rushed to embrace their lost relatives with cries of joy.
"I wanted to make amends," said Tsar proudly. "I tried to take magic from a witch, and I stole a sword that brought the witch to us, so I returned the sword to Sycorax's dungeons, and while I was there, I realized she was keeping our people prisoners. So I rescued them."
Well, for astonishingly mad but brave acts like that one, they would all be prepared to forgive Tsar, even if he had led troops of witches into the camp, as long as he killed them all, of course. Incanzu was very rarely pleased with his son, but here was his son doing something right for a change. The most important right thing of all being, he had returned home alive. For the first time, Incanzu the king enchanter shook his son by the hand, as if he were an equal. Tsar thought he had never been so happy in his life. To see his father looking at him, Tsar, with such pride, such love, such admiration. To see everyone else in the camp cheering and applauding him. The enchanter turned to the crowd.
"Perhaps there needs to be room in the wizard world for those who have no magic," cried the enchanter. "For look, these brave wizards, giants and sprites are returning to us with their magic removed. We need to find a place for these people, do we not, in our society?"
And the crowd cried back, "We do! We do!"
"I would like to propose 3 cheers for my son Tsar," said the enchanter, "who braved the terrors of Sycorax's dungeons to bring these old friends back to us, at great danger to himself and his sprites and animals."
"Tsar! Tsar! Tsar!" cheered the wizards. "Why is Tsar so annoying?" raged Luther, clenching his fist.
"My son has returned to me, and he returns a better person. Tsar has learned a lesson," smiled the enchanter, "that it is far, far wiser to wait for your magic to come in than to try and obtain it from a dark source."
He turned to his son.
"And Tsar has taught me a lesson too. It is far, far better to have a son who has no magic than to have no son at all. Welcome home, Tsar."
The enchanter hugged his son. And then the enchanter turned once more to the cheering crowd.
"So, I declare this a day of thanks and celebrations. Let's see, what shall we call it?" said the enchanter.
And if he hadn't been such a very great enchanter, that might have been a twinkle in the grim grey of his eye.
"We shall call it the celebration of Tsar not coming into his magic. Let the festivities begin."
Now, wizards never need much excuse to have a party. The hall went mad, with fiddles magically playing themselves, the zigzagging glow of sprites zooming everywhere, and wizards and snowcats and giants and dwarves and animals of all shapes and sizes dancing and singing and howling to the dark winter sky.
"Are we free now, master?"
Ariel asked, flying up to the enchanter, wanting to get him while he was in a rare good mood.
"Don't forget that you promised us, Caliburn and me, our freedom when the boy grows up and no longer needs us. We are spirits too brave for a boy like Tsar."
"I haven't forgotten,"
snapped the enchanter, his benevolence disappearing.
"But let's face it, Tsar will need you for a little while longer. I will not release you and Caliburn until the boy grows up into a wise and thoughtful adult."
"That may never happen," said the raven.
"In which case you will never be free," said the enchanter grimly. "And by the way, Caliburn—"
Yes, enchanter?" said Caliburn, starting guiltily.
"At some point I will want a full report of exactly what went on over the last 24 hours. Now is the time for celebration. But later you must tell me the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Caliburn."
And off the enchanter swept, with a rather unnerving thunderclap sweep of his cloak to join in the merrymaking. "I'd rather you didn't tell him the whole truth," grinned Tsar.
"Yes," said Caliburn, "I think I might leave out the bit about the sword being iron and magic mixed together, and the sprite being poisoned, and the witch in the stone, and Wish being the girl of destiny. In fact, now I come to think of it, there's not a great deal of the story I can tell, is there?"
"Definitely don't tell him this, then," said Tsar, a mischievous glint in his eye as he opened up his hand. There, right in the centre of the palm, was the very faint pale green mark of a washed-out witch stain.
Caliburn gave a squawk of absolute horror. "The witch stain! What happened? I thought you'd got rid of it."
"So did I,"
grinned Tsar, closing his fist around it again.
"But I must have come off the stone too quickly. And you know the best thing about it?"
Now Tsar could not repress his excitement.
"I think it's beginning to work."
But, Tsar!"
gabbled poor Caliburn. "It's bad magic from a dark source. We've just gone through all this, and I thought you'd learned your lesson and returned a better person, just like your father said. What has the whole moral of this entire adventure all been about?" But Tsar had already hurried off, worried he was going to miss some of the Tsar not coming into his magic celebrations, while the sprites joined enthusiastically into the festivities and were zooming around getting into their usual mischief, such as Tiffin-Storm had a wonderful time aiming spells at people's food, so that when they picked it up it was something yummy like a nice slice of apple pie, but by the time it reached their mouths it had turned into something disgusting like a giant slug. Squeeze-Juice set off a stink spell, though typically he got it wrong, and instead of smelling of bad eggs it smelled rather deliciously of lemons. And Tsar showed off to all the prettiest girls without a care in the world. Meanwhile, poor old Caliburn was sitting on a tree branch, worrying and trying to comfort himself. "Maybe because the King Witch is dead," the bird said to himself, "the witches will go back to sleep again. Maybe, even if they wake again in our lifetime, they will not find the girl, because she will not be so silly as to venture out of the iron fort again, because maybe she is one of those rare humans who learn from their mistakes. Maybe—" Then, as is the way of warriors, having made himself feel better about one worry, he immediately started to worry about something else. "Tsar wished for magic, and he got it, and it is bad magic indeed. And if his father ever finds out about it, then Tsar will be in bigger trouble than ever," worried Caliburn. "And although they are happy with him now, it will not take them long to remember his past disobediences. Give a were-dog a bad name and all that." The old raven cocked his head to the other side, as if to consider the alternatives. "But then maybe Tsar will learn to control that magic of his before his father finds out. There is good in Tsar, and this adventure has brought that out too. The good in Tsar will control the bad in the blood. Maybe. "Caliburn!" yelled Tsar from below. "Stop sitting up there being all gloomy and worrying." Tsar looked around him to check no one was looking, and then he pointed his hand with the witch stain on it up at the tree branch. Tsar must have tried to perform magic 1,000 times before, and it had never worked. But this time was different. This time he felt this extraordinary tingling feeling, a kind of pins and needles in his entire right arm. It was as if some weird muscle that he had never felt before was stretching out and unfurling. And to Tsar's delight, he could feel the magic curving out of his fingertips. It exploded the tree branch that Caliburn was sitting on, and with a disgruntled shriek the old bird fell out of the sky in a flurry of feathers and flapped protestingly in front of Tsar's grinning face.
"It worked!" cried Tsar, looking at his hand in total delight. "Everything has been worth it! I did get magic in the end after all!"
Caliburn sighed a very, very deep sigh. The moral of the adventure had gone all wrong somehow, and Tsar, learning to be good, was going to take a little time. But in the meantime—
"Worry tomorrow, old bird," smiled Tsar. "Tonight we dance."
And the wizard boy took the raven by the wings, and the old bird forgot to worry, and he became like a chick again, as Tsar whirled him round and round, dancing with him under the cold of the midnight stars. Epilogue. So, that was the story of Tsar and Wish, and how their stars crossed on a midnight deep, long, long ago in the ancient past, before the British Isles knew they were the British Isles yet, and the magic lived in the dark forests. And, a little like Caliburn, I am still trying to figure out the moral of it. You have to listen to the stories, for stories always mean something. But what worries me is, what exactly do they mean? It's the story of how Tsar got himself some magic, and how Wish found out she was special, and how the King Witch escaped from the stone. So everyone got their wishes, but not quite in the way they expected. Because, and I think I have mentioned this once or thrice before, you have to be careful what you wish for, guys. It may come true.
Right at the beginning of this story, I said it was being told by one of the characters. Did you guess which one? I could be any of them, couldn't I? Tsar, or Wish, or Bodkin, the assistant bodyguard with the dream of being a hero, Sycorax, or Incanzo, or one of the sprites, or that dusty old bird, Caliburn, the raven who has lived many lifetimes. I could be any of these characters, good or bad, or a mixture of both. I'm not going to tell you the answer to who I am yet. You will have to keep on guessing. For we have not reached the end of the story, not by a long way. The King Witch is out of the stone, like a genie out of the bottle. He will be looking for Wish, for she has the magic that works on iron. And Tsar has bad magic, and we do not yet know how that will turn out. Under Wish's pillow, the spelling book is sleeping. But it could wake any moment. Let us hope that Caliburn is right, and it will help her fight back against wicked people with strong magic and evil hearts, who might want to get hold of the magic she possesses. For where there is one witch, there will be others. Keep hoping. Keep guessing. Keep dreaming. Signed, the Unknown Narrator. Once there was magic, wandering free, in roads of sky and paths of sea, and in that timeless long-gone hour, words of nonsense still had power. Doors still flew, and birds still talked, witches grinned, and giants walked. We had magic wands and magic wings, and we lost our hearts to impossible things. Unbelievable thoughts, unsensible ends, for wizards and warriors might be friends. In a world where impossible things are true, I don't know why we forgot the spell, when we lost the way, how the forest fell, but now we are old, we can vanish too. And I see once more the invisible track that will lead us home and take us back. So find your wands and spread your wings. I'll sing our love of impossible things. And when you take my vanished hand, we'll both go back to that magic land where we lost our hearts several lifetimes ago, when we were wizards once. The Spelling Book. A complete guide to the entire magical world. Hello, welcome to the Spelling Book. Your personally selected question is, how do you escape from a magic tree in a wizard's fort and make your way through the Badwoods when you have no transport, no map, and no means of knowing where you are? Please note, if the spelling book malfunctions, you will unfortunately have to turn all 6,304,560 pages yourself. Sorry about that. Jumbo frilly-eared dreamer giant. Short-legged giants like this one have very long arms, so they are excellent climbers. There are many different species of giants: frost giants, colossal clumpers, dreamers, monumenters. Despite their name, giants actually come in various sizes. Most giants are herbivores, and about the size of the treetops, so they can hide from raptogriff flocks flying above the wildwoods. See page 2,041. Long-stepper high-walker giant. Long-stepper high-walker giants make huge holloways, a sprite word for paths, as they wander through the wildwoods, thinking great thoughts about life on Earth and the mysteries of the universe. Gruntalogre roger breath. The stinky armpit Gruntle Ogre Roger Breath puts cow poo under his armpits as a charming perfume to attract female Gruntle Ogres. Yucky, but true. Warning, do not attempt to reason with this man. He isn't very reasonable. Spelling. Your handy magic guide to how it works. Most sprites are too small for their magic to have any effect on larger creatures than themselves all on its own. Their magic must therefore be concentrated in small spells, like little balls or bombs that the sprite keeps in a spell bag around its waist. The sprite also has a quiver of wands, and when a spell needs to be launched, the sprite chooses the correct wand for the spell and whacks it toward the victim. Different types of spells. Flying spell, water spell, fire spell, love spell, growing spell, spell of forgetting, invisibility spell, thunder spell. Lost words. As the long-stepper high-walker giants criss-cross the forests of Albion, their heads smoking, they are also collecting lost and endangered words. The giant's view is, if you lose the words to describe things, how can you think about them? Here are some sprite words for things that are in danger of becoming lost.
Phizmer.
Rustling noise in grasses.
Dragon cold.
Weather so freezing it makes the breath smoke, so that people look like dragons.
Hair ice.
Frost growing like fungus on dead wood.
Will-o'-the-wisp.
Trails of light following after sprites as they fly through woods in the darkness.
Holloway.
Paths made through wild woods by wandering giants.
Cowbelly.
Word for mud at the bottom of the river.
Elf locks.
The tangled hair of sleepers.
Ghost trails.
The light trails made by sprites at night time. See also Will-o'-the-wisp.
Snaily sludge.
The revolting bogey trail left by a Roger Breath.
Flitters.
To move house, go walkabout. Sprite curses. In the world of magic, words have power, so cursing is a very powerful weapon. The Druids, or Druids, have made quite an art of it.
May you get a cold that makes your nose drip like a snotty stream of bogey sludge for 5 whole weeks, and may your armpits itch like they are being bitten by were-rats. May you be swallowed by a cow that is eaten by a whale that is on its way down to the dreariest depths of the sandiest wastes of the endless and bottomless ocean.
Please note, sprites have an artistic approach to spelling. They think it doesn't matter what order the letters are in, as long as you understand what they have written.
Witches.
Witches are extinct, so here at the Spelling Book we cannot show you a picture of a witch, because nobody alive has ever seen one. What to do if witches were by some awful chance not to be extinct? 1. We have no idea. 2. Don't try running, they'll catch you. 3. You could use iron, but magic people are allergic to iron. 4. See point 1 above. Oh, and don't look at them. Just looking at a witch can scare a person to death. Spelling staffs. A beginner wizard, like Czar, can only use a staff made out of birch. Oak is a good all-round choice, while willow is used for healing. Ash is used for spells of transformation and enchantment, but it can be hard to control. Blackthorn is a dangerous wood, used for spell fights and dark magic. Only the very greatest wizards can use a staff made out of yew. The magic eye. Very, very rarely, a wizard is born with a magic eye. This is a very powerful magic that can be difficult to control. It is often associated with enchanters who have more than one life. Love Never Lies potion. If you drink Love Never Lies potion, you will fall in love with the next person you see. It is also a truth drug. The liquid turns from red to blue when the person holding it is telling a lie. The Spelling Book thanks you for listening. and would gently remind you that things generally turn out all right. In the end.